Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. Ledger.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. Before we begin with the agenda, I have some housekeeping rules which we read out at every scrutiny committee. So can I remind everyone that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person for those of you sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function if you're joining us remotely. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate that they wish to speak, or place a message in the chat function and we will pick that up. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. And if this isn't possible, please bring it to my attention or to the attention of the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function, as I've already explained, can be used to highlight any technical issues. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, they should let myself or Democratic Services Officer know. So please can I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, public speakers, Vale residents, and also all those joining us in the public gallery and anyone else who's watching the live meeting broadcast. Moving straight onto the agenda and beginning with apologies for absence. Do we have any?
I've not had anything through, Chair.
Thank you. And I don't see any hands, so I assume all committee members are present. On to declarations of interest. Are there any, please? Councillor Ernest.
Yes, Chairman. I declare a personal interest as a member of Penarth Yacht Club, but I also am the ward member and have to represent the wider views of my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. I don't think there's any need to declare an interest in relation to being a ward member, but we will note the declaration in relation to the Yacht Club. Thank you. And then we move on to agenda item 3, the car parking report. Before we begin the agenda, I want to ensure everybody understands the process that we're going to be following tonight. So as you're all aware, the Cabinet has approved in principle a number of proposals about changes to car parking. That phrase, in principle, is important because it means that final decisions have not yet been made. The role of this scrutiny committee is to consider the information in the report before us, listen to all the views expressed, and consider whether or not we accept the proposals or want to make any recommendations back to Cabinet for their consideration. In addition to members of the public who join us tonight to speak to the committee, committee has also received, I believe, approximately 375 emails, a summary of which has been prepared for committee members. We've also had 4 letters of representation, one on behalf of the Barry Island traders, one from Marie Curie and one from Penarth Yacht Club and one from an individual. We've also received late representations via emails from Councillor Marnie and Perry, which have been shared with elected members this evening. All the information is available with committee papers on the Council's website. I have read it all with interest, and I just want to take time. I want to thank everybody who's taken time to engage with this issue. In terms of how the meeting tonight is going to be structured, I've asked officers to present the proposals one at a time. I'll then invite the Cabinet member to make any comments on the proposal being considered, but of course the Cabinet member may prefer to wait until the whole report has actually been presented by officers. That will be followed by any members of the public who've joined us tonight to speak on any particular issue within the report, and equally members of the public may wish to wait until the whole report has been presented before addressing the committee. Members of the public have 3 minutes to speak. I will then invite any non-committee members who wish to speak, and finally, once all non-committee members and members of the public have spoken, then the committee members will formally debate the issues. Once the formal debate is concluded, I will summarise the debate and draw together recommendations if there are any. So we move on to agenda item 3, the report on car parking. This is a reference from Cabinet, and we're joined by Miles Punter, the Director of Environment and Housing Services, and also Colin Smith, the Head of Neighbourhood Services, who will take us through the report. Miles, I believe you're going to introduce the report, and then you'll hand over to Colin, who will take us through the first part of it. So over to you, Miles. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If Mark could share the presentation. What we've done, Chair, we put a PowerPoint presentation because it's a very detailed report, as you'd appreciate, and we've broken the report down into those segments to give the opportunity for committee and members of the public to debate those particular points. So I'll set the context for the report, and my colleague Colin Smith will take you through the detail of that. So we can move to slide 1, please, Mark. So essentially a bit of background. This council's been debating car parking and whether or not to introduce charges for some time. I first was involved in 2013, and what I put there as the first bullet point was the most recent times this has been to Cabinet. 2018 and 2019, when we did a significant consultation on a proposed parking management policy at that time. It followed a report from a company called Capita that was provided to us in 2018. So I think it's fair to say that the council at that time wanted a more holistic approach to car parking, and a recognition that parking in town centres is quite different to parking in resorts. So there was some time when the comments from the public were considered, and the guiding principles and charges for car parking document was produced in 2021. Many of the principles that were agreed at that time follow through the processes and the report that is in front of you this evening. The guiding principles and charges for car park in 2021 saw us make some changes. We introduced charging in our country parks. We introduced charging in 2 town centre car parks, and we took away the seasonal charges at our coastal resorts in recognition that there was a lot of activity happening out of season because their popularity was increasing. We also brought in season tickets, and the importance of the season ticket was to address issues with traders and members of the public. So they're primarily bought by traders and members of the public. And now if you buy a season ticket, it works out at less than £2 a week to park at our resort car parks, and you can use them at any of our resort car parks, and that position is still the same. So in terms of the proposals in front of you today, the situation's moved on significantly from 2018, when we first started to talk about issues like on-street parking and introducing new off-street parking charges. We've got a Project Zero policy. As a council, we're looking to do what we can to protect the environment, and under that policy, we look to promote active travel, modal shifts, so we look to move people out of motor cars into buses and onto trains, and onto walking and cycling. So one of the things that charging can do, it can encourage people to look at alternative means of transport. So that's something that we've agreed since the original report was introduced. We've also looked with this report to, and you can't do this ultimately, but it was our aim to try and ensure that if people are paying to park, it's generally visitors to the Vale as opposed to residents. Now, you can't categorically say that because you can't split the two, but that was the design. It is people come into the Vale, they enjoy our amenities. It was to achieve a contribution for that enjoyment of those amenities, so that you'll see that running through the report. We also mention existing costs within the document because our costs are increasing exponentially with the success of Barry Island and other resort areas, which is fantastic, but with that comes additional costs for cleaning and the management of those resorts. And people expect them to be at the highest standard, and that's what we were looking to maintain. So I finish off there on the bottom of this slide by talking about the budget for 24-25. It was agreed there would be £150,000 saving or income for car parking, which is not yet achieved. Our budget position as a council is even more challenging going forward. When I was in Colin's role in 2002, the area of neighbourhood services had 15% of the council's overall budget. It now has 8%. And the reason for that is because we're looking to invest in young people, and the cost of social care has increased over that time. So the reality is we've got less and less money to play with as a set of very important frontline services. So in terms of next year, our challenge, if you like, is to save 2.4 million. And the concern is, unless we find ways of doing things differently, then you will see a degradation of services that people expect over time. So that's one of our concerns. Primarily, the reason for moving towards the changes, reducing congestion, moving people from the street into car parks where possible, encouraging modal shift, encouraging behavioural change. Also, these areas currently have, the ones that are on street have 2-hour limited waiting. So you can't park there for longer than 2 hours as they stand. And the problem with limited waiting in terms of enforcement, we cannot enforce that with a camera car. You have to enforce it on foot, and it takes a significant resource. So it means we have to have staff on the ground almost every hour of the day to see when people arrive and see when they leave. That isn't the case if you charge for spaces, because there's a ticket in the window that it isn't. So one of the things we didn't want to do is welcome to Barry Island or welcome to Penarth and look at the fact that there's wardens walking up and down the street, which is one of the issues we've got. Currently, we've got situations where a lot of the parking spaces at Barry Island and at Penarth are being stayed in for longer than the 2-hour period. And as I say, that's an enforcement challenge for us. So hopefully, Chair, I've set the context. I hand over to my colleague, Colin, who'll take you through each particular subheading, then we'll answer any questions we can at the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Miles. Okay, can we, you've done the next slide. So just as an introduction, and the report, the car parking report, is a referral from Cabinet 9th of January 2025 to the committee. And the report proposes on-street and off-street parking charges at 5 coastal locations. The details of anticipated income and associated costs, and the future of Court Road multi-storey car park Barry, and the future proposals for residential parking permits. So, Chair, just to let you know, I'll start with the on-street proposal. We'll pause after and open for discussion and questions, and likewise for each element of the report. Next slide, please. So on the car parking proposals on street, the anticipated income is potentially 204,000, calculated in the boxes included within the report, and that's taken from 23% of the Nels Point capacity. And there are 2 other tables looking at 18% of a midpoint and 15% of all car parks consolidated rate. And we think really the pitched area is around the 23% mark as how the £204,000 of income is proposed. And based on a new charging schedule, and which was amended at Cabinet on the 9th of January 2025. And the schedule is detailed in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. So that's parking up to 2 hours, £2.50, up to 3 hours, £4, and up to 4 hours, £6, and that would be the maximum term of parking up to 4 hours. So you wouldn't be able to stay any longer on those on-street locations. Likewise, the time originally in the report was proposed from 8 in the morning to 6 p.m. I say that was what was amended at Cabinet is the timing, so it would only apply from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on the basis that the people who use the resorts early in the morning, particularly bathers, dog walkers, etc., can park free up until 10 o'clock, and to allow for evening trade as well. There would be capital set-up costs of £159,501.49 broken down into Penarth and Barry to facilitate the car parking charges, and that would need to be funded from capital reserves and paid back over a period of time. There would be ongoing revenue costs as well of £10,000 for servicing the machines, and that £10,000 revenue cost would be added to existing duties to the staff who manage the car parks. Next slide, please. So, as detailed in the map that's is the exact map that's attached to the appendices of the report, the area is highlighted. It incorporates Paget Road, Friars Road, Breaksea Drive and Station Approach Road, which has a potential of 150 spaces. There isn't a further detailed design available yet, but the report asks for delegated authority to be able to produce and detail that design at a later stage if this is approved and the proposals move forward. Next slide, please. Likewise, it's the same for Penarth, as detailed within the appendices of the report. There is the element highlighted along the Esplanade, up Cliff Hill, and across towards the Clifftop car parks. Potentially, which is bridge over there. I'll explain actually. The small section opposite the pier, there's only a very small proportion of picture.
Sorry, forgive me interrupting you, Colin. Members of the public in the public gallery, I'm afraid you're not able to turn the screen. It means that I'm not able to see the presentation myself. So thank you very much. I appreciate that the screens here are a long way away, but hopefully the papers you have in front of you are sufficient. Thank you. Apologies for interrupting you, Colin.
That's no problem, Chair. So just to clarify, because we've had queries about this in the recent weeks, is opposite the pier, there is only a small number of car parks and spaces that would be subject to charging on the hill next to the apartments, which is the former baths, and then along the Esplanade, up Cliff Hill, and then turning left into Parade Walk into the main car park located on Cliff Hill. Okay. So this is the last slide before we pause for questions and discussions. So just to put a bit of context around this, this focuses on allocating premium spaces that are currently without charge and priority directing users to the main car parks. So that's where the congestion element comes in within the report. So instead of people or persons visiting a resort, driving around looking for car parking spaces, our strategy would be to push them all to the main car parks wherever possible. And then that eases a little bit of congestion around, and it's also slightly cheaper in the main car parks, what the report proposes. And then also that would be our strategy for managing congestion at short and long-term parking arrangements at the resorts in general. It's really important to highlight that our season tickets are available, as Miles mentioned earlier, that are available to Vale residents. So effectively, with a season ticket, it costs £2 a week over a period of a year, because it's £100 a year. So an average in £2 a week. And for that £2 a week, you can park unlimited in the car parks at Barry Island and Penarth and the other coastal locations around the Vale, unlimited over a 7-day period for £2 a week, which we think is excellent value and an alternative to parking on the front at the in the proposed premium spaces. So just to touch on the costs of the existing costs around the resorts. So this is a general cost from one end of the Vale to the other, but most of them are associated with Barry Island and Penarth. The costs at the moment are £1.7 million for maintaining the resorts, and there's a net income of £985,000. So effectively a deficit costs of maintaining the resorts of £746,000, and that was in 23-24. And in this year, we're projecting a deficit of £900,000. It's really important to note that the proposal is compliant with the relative legislative framework, specifically around Section 55 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and Traffic Management Act 2024. I know that seems quite a lot to take in, but effectively what that means is we can only spend car park money on certain areas of our business. So the reason we say is to offset costs against the resort. It's not specifically to use that money on resorts, but effectively we can use it for certain elements of the business, which is mainly things like public transport or car park maintenance, etc. And at the moment, there is a deficit cost of £911,000 just attributed to those areas of the business. So effectively, that £900,000 we have to subsidise comes out of the existing budget of neighbourhood services and effectively puts pressure on the operational elements for managing resorts. So the more we can offset against those costs, the more we can kind of make available for managing resorts. So it will minimise the impact on operational budgets, as I've explained, and just for 25-26, the budget savings attributed to just waste collections, street cleansing and parks areas is £750,000, our savings target, which includes savings for the resorts, even if this proposal is agreed. So there, as Miles mentioned earlier, there are significant pressures on the service area. And to be honest, this is not unique to the Vale of Glamorgan. It's really important to point that out. It's something that's unique to all public services or subject to. So it's not unique to the Vale of Glamorgan, that's for sure. And I think we only have to turn the news on to understand the difficulties we are facing in public services on a national scale. There are equalities impact assessments completed for this proposal for car parking charges and for Court Road, proposed closures of Court Road multi-storey car park, and we will upload those and attach them to the Cabinet report as soon as we can. They will be subject to traffic regulation changes, order changes, TROs, and these are subject to a 21-day consultation period. So effectively what that means, we will have to apply notices if this proceeds to those locations, advising of the traffic regulation order changes in detail, and then that 21-day consultation period is an opportunity for everybody to raise any objections, comments, concerns, and if there are any in any of those locations that I've identified or presented as part of the report, then a Cabinet report will have to be prepared and presented to the Cabinet for consideration. Okay. At that point, Chair, I'll put the pause in for the appropriate discussion and questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. And before I invite members of the public who want to speak on this issue, we are joined by the Cabinet member, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson, do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, by all means. Can I thank the officers for giving a really good presentation there. What I'm here today, I'm here to listen to the debate. If members or non-members of the council, I mean, members of the Scrutiny Committee and non-members of the Scrutiny Committee and members of the public, you know, have got issues or questions they want to ask me, direct or indirect, and I will respond accordingly at each particular section. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. And now I'm going to invite members of the public who've indicated that they want to address the committee on this issue. Just to remind members of the public, you have up to 3 minutes to speak to us. And I'm going to start, if I may, by inviting Ms. Laura Davenport to speak. Welcome to the committee, Laura, and thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thanks. So I'm Laura Davenport, the owner of Scoop, an ice cream, coffee, cake and sandwich shop in Barry Island. I'm also the owner of the Posh Fish and Chip Company, a multi-award nominated business with a flagship that's been a thriving business in Landa for 12 years. Both of these businesses have just been announced as finalists in the Cardiff Life Awards for Best New and Best Small Business. I live in Barry on Cannon Street after growing up in Cardiff and moving here nearly 10 years ago, and have loved it ever since. I opened Scoop in June last year as I wanted to open a business closer to home and bring something different to Barry that fills a gap that I and others talk to feel are here. The plan was hopefully, and still is, to bring Posh to Barry for Posh Fish and Chips at Company X Scoop. This hasn't proved easy thus far. Barry Island is a funny old place. Yes, for a few days in the summer, they're very busy days with visitors coming from all over the country. And post the Gavin and Stacey Christmas special, there was a surge. However, the huge vast majority of my customers outside of those days are regulars who are local. Not local enough to walk necessarily, but local enough to drive and come for a coffee and a catch-up with their friends. I've spoken to those customers, many of whom we've created close relationships with, and 100% of them has said that they definitely wouldn't come to Barry Island as regularly if these changes were to come in, if at all. The huge feedback has been that they will instead go to places like Academy or other coffee shops nearby as parking is free. I know I speak on behalf of the other traders when I say that this is a common theme, both for other coffee shops and other businesses on the island. Times are tough in a cost of living crisis and money is tight. 3.5 thousand members of the public who've signed the petition in a few days are already trying to make that clear. There seems to have been no conversation on not only the impacts, but also whether there could be any seasonality around these changes, whether the first couple of hours could be free or taking into account any of the insight from your own surveys about what local people want in Barry Island that council officers went through with me last week in the placemaking session they had organised. There's definitely no details shared on what work has taken place to lower the 1.7 million upkeep of Barry Island, rather than to try and make money to fill that gap. I attended the placemaking trade meeting last week, as I said, with council officials who said that they had not even been spoken to about these changes. We also talked about the many surveys that have taken place over the years, and the feedback that in Barry Island the public feels that they want places to sit in and eat with healthy options, good quality food, and somewhere open past 5 p.m. They don't want to pay to park. Within both businesses, I pride myself on serving local quality products. I want to offer a nice experience and something different for the island. But as a business, if your own customers are telling you that they're not going to come anymore, what is the point? Why invest any more in a project that's ticking the boxes for what placemaking in Barry is supposed to be about? If these changes came into place, I'd be forced to close and move my business somewhere else, and I know others are in the same boat.
Very much, Ms Davenport. Can I ask if any members of the committee want to clarify any of the points that Ms Davenport has raised? No? Thank you very much. We move on then to the next member of the public who I believe wants to address committee on this issue. Just to be clear, for those members of the public who've asked to speak, I'll invite you in where you've indicated you want to speak on a specific aspect of the report. But if you want to wait until the end, until you've heard the whole presentation, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so no pressure to come in just when I invite you in. If you want to wait, you can wait. And I think next we have Mr. Louis Ross. Is Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross, apologies, I couldn't see you.
That's okay, I'm here.
Yeah, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Ross.
Okie dokes. Well, some people here have extremely short memories. Back in 2019, some people gave me a lot of help and advice and support in getting these charges overturned. I personally feel like I have been betrayed on this. All your concerns and recommendations and assurances of engagement back then, which is all documented in the public domain, has seemingly been forgotten. But don't worry, fear not, I did not forget. Has the local economy even crossed your mind? The answer to that is no, because if it had, then you would have reached out to engage with the traders of Barry Island. You state on-street parking charges will not be detrimental to visitors on Barry Island. I agree with the council. Tourists should pay. However, locals should not. And it is the locals that keep us going when there's no tourists around on Barry Island. They are encouraged to shop local, and now you want to make it much more difficult for them. 15 years ago, all the traders on Barry Island would close from the start of November until the start of March. We have worked hard to entice people down out of season and make Barry Island a huge success for all. Please don't undo this hard work and turn Barry Island backwards. If all the locals have a choice between paying to park on Barry Island or going to another shop that has free parking, eventually they're going to find a place that has free parking. And they're going to visit the island less, and they're going to spend less in the shops and the cafes, and we're going to spend less as businesses in the local economy and give less jobs. This is not going to happen overnight, of course, but this is going to happen over time. You state that Sorry, I lost my trail of thought there. You state that the council has budget constraints for this coming year. However, but you're not going to make any profit from these for several years. Are you ready to gamble on people's jobs? But also, I would like to say that these economies are fragile, but these aren't my words. I'm going to say that now. I'm going to say now exactly what I said in 2019. 2 hours free parking on Barry Island that has a ticket. After that, you charge. This will allow the council to control all the congestion, enforce it, and make additional revenue from all the parking, and allow all the traders. Allow all the traders to keep their local trade. I will end by saying this. Had you had a single thought of concern for the traders on Barry Island, then you should have engaged. All your assurances were false promises. And now you have two choices. You do what you think is right, or you do what the people of Barry want. The thousands of people that signed the petition and sent in emails objecting. And now it's your choice. And if you make the wrong choice, the people of Barry are not going to forget.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Do any members of committee want to clarify anything that Mr. Ross has said? No, in that case, we will move on to Mr. Matt Holland. I believe you also want to talk about on-street parking. Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you. Okay, so just to explain, I'm Matt Holland. I'm from Wilmore's 1938. We have two premises that are both actually leased from the council directly. One is in Cosmeston Lake by the country park. The other one is at the Clifftop car park. We're in quite a unique position because you introduced charges into the Cosmeston car park 2 years ago, and we actually saw a direct drop in business after that charge was introduced. Initially, it dropped by a 30% take on our trade, which resulted in us having to negotiate with the other trader at the site and to split our days, which meant we couldn't trade for a 7-day period. We trade now for 5. In the summer, that used to go back to 7 because trade picked back up again, but that didn't happen this year. And now we're down to around about a 20% drop. So it has improved slightly. People are coming back. But the overflow car park hardly gets used now in Cosmeston. It used to be regularly used. The second overflow car park would be full every summer day when the sun's shining, and that doesn't happen anymore. People locally aren't willing to pay the charge. We used to have a very good trade between 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning. People dog walking, that's dropped drastically. Initially, it was 10 o'clock, and it was a £1 charge. You then changed it to 9 o'clock and increased the charge. So, my concern is if you're bringing these charges into Penarth, are you going to change the times? Are you going to change the charges in a quick succession? Because that happened within 6 months of Cosmeston. If I'm wrong, you can change. Tell me about that. So this actually resulted in us losing a full-time member of staff at Cosmeston, and I know that will probably happen for a lot of the traders in Penarth if these charges go ahead. I understand there's a need for income to be increased. I understand that in the current climate, and we've been doing that as a business since COVID. It's been quite tough. So these charges puts more pressure on us as a business. I'm not actually 100% sure if someone can clarify exactly where the actual parking charge is going to be at the Clifftops. Are they actually in the car park?
I'm so sorry, but I'm afraid you're not allowed to ask any direct questions, okay. But I will make sure that question is picked up.
I'm not 100% sure that's why, because my concerns over that are regards the actual car park itself and the condition it's in. It's in a pretty bad state of repair. There's lots of potholes. There's lots of curbs that are just in random places. An elderly gentleman broke his hip there in November, falling in dark light because at 4 o'clock at the Clifftops, it is pitch black. So my concern is that your charges are at 6 o'clock and you've got no lighting or no operative light in there. You also need to be aware that there's no electric capacity in the Clifftop car park. The actual electricity is overcapacitated. So you're going to be putting electric meters in. I don't know if they're solar powered, I don't know how they work, but obviously there's no electrical capacity up there. We were told that by Western Power when we built the kiosk. So you need to be aware of that as well. reiterate what the gentleman said behind me. You know, a scheme where because a lot of people come to our shop for a coffee and a sandwich and a cake, they stay for half an hour, 20 minutes, an hour. If we could have a period where regular customers can come and maybe have a ticket that get an hour free or 2 hours free for the local community, that'd be fantastic. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the committee want to clarify anything? Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Matt. Just checking that you said about 5. Are you down to 5 days now, or are you at 7 days in terms of trading?
In Cosmester Lake, we're down to 5 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ernest.
Thank you, Matt. You were saying how the business drops off in the winter months. Would you like to tell the committee the difference in volume as you see it, you know, between the summer months and the dark and wet winter months?
You know, obviously the rain is the big effect on our business. We are weather dependent, but yeah, it's a massive difference in trade. You know, it's a huge drop in business, probably 50% drop in business.
50%.
Yeah, it's a very tough time over the winter period. This year we had Santa Claus at the cliff tops, which actually saved us really. It was very, you know, that's what we're always doing. We're always moving forward, trying to introduce new types of business to actually drive it up there in the winter. So that was a big saviour for us. So, but yeah, definitely the winter periods are a lot tougher.
And do you ever find in the winter months?
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, we are just looking at points of clarification, and I'd be grateful if you want to come back in, if you indicate through the chair, because a lot of people are waiting to speak. So is it a point of clarification that you want to make?
It's really just a point of clarification about the levels of business summer and winter. When do you actually find that drops off, the summer business? I mean, is it literally the end of the summer term, or is it later than that?
No, it's normally around about the October time.
Right.
Yeah, we have a good steady September, and then as soon as the wet weather comes in and the wind and the rain, then that's when it'll drop off.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And I believe we also have Mr. Jonathan Osborne, who wants to speak to committee about this specific issue. Is Mr. Osborne joining us online?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So he should be online now. Mr. Osborne, can you press the button at the bottom of your screen? And that should bring you on camera and audio.
We will just give Mr. Osborne a few minutes to see if he's able to join us.
Mr. Osborne, can I just... Oh, no, he's coming on now. Mr. Osborne, can we just check your volume? You've got no audio at the moment. Yeah, there's no audio coming through, Mr. Osborne. We can see you on camera.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Is that too loud?
No, that's fine. That's lovely. Thanks.
That's good.
Thank you.
Right. You okay? Right, we're all good. Okay, yeah, as an operator of several businesses on the island, I wish to convey my feelings towards the latest proposals involving the charging for the on-street parking. There has been no thorough consultation with the traders or the public about these proposed changes and charges. The whole process is flawed and it's being rushed through. There's been no traffic survey and no study of the effect of trade or tourism. It is estimated that businesses will lose as much as up to 52% of trade if car parking charges are implemented on the street. This is quoted in a national newspaper article. Therefore, does the council have help available for businesses, such as reduced business rates or subsidies to help for this? The loss of trade also results in many job losses as a knock-on effect. I've spoken to customers who've already told me that once the charging goes ahead, they're going elsewhere. They're going to be going to the goods sheds, the waterfront, anywhere where they don't have to pay for the car parking. And that seems to be the general consensus on the island. The leader publicly stated recently in the Glamorgan Star and some other newspapers that the reason the charging was going ahead was because of a budget shortfall and to look after resort areas. I would like to inform the committee that obviously street parking charges can only set in for relieving or preventing congestion of traffic and not for any other reason. This is quoted in the Road Traffic Act 1984. It means that what the council are proposing is actually illegal because there's been no report of this congestion, and also the funds cannot be used for any other means other than provision of the space itself, which means you have to use the money for the meters and everything else. You can't use it to paint things and do everything else. So if the money's only going to be used for that, I don't see what the point in going ahead is, because all you're doing is just creating a job for somebody to go around and ticket the cars. You know, it's not going to help. And if you're encouraging longer stays of the on-street parking, which will happen because you're saying you can have 3 and 4 hours, it's actually going to create congestion. So, you know, that's what you need to look at. You need to look at the actual traffic, get the numbers and have people in and see what's going on. Also, there's already over 5,000 signatures against this online on the petitions, and I believe you've had over 400 or nearly 400 letters of objection. You cannot ignore these. These are coming from the same people that have voted you into power, and they'll never forget this if you put it through, because the feeling on the island here is so ill. Everybody is saying they won't be coming here. I know you want to target the tourists. Fair enough. They can pay in the car park, and they do anyway. But all this on-street charging, it just shouldn't be going ahead. I feel that the council does not want tourists to the island, and these charges are part of a wider agenda just to destroy the resort. All major events have been lost over the years. We've lost the Isle of Fire, the outdoor cinema, the fireworks, the 10K run, and now we've also lost the Sea Shanty Festival. They've gone to Newport because our council wasn't engaging with them. There's no active marketing for tourist accommodation on the island. Up at Nell's Point, 30 years we waited for this. Nothing's happening. Locals are being punished by having to pay to visit their beauty spots, which shouldn't be happening. They already pay council tax. They should have the right to come here and anywhere else and just walk and do what they want. They shouldn't be having to pay to come. And it's not fair, because it's their own health and well-being you have to look at, and people want to get out without having to pay extra fees. New parking charges will only send even more visitors away.
Mr. Osborne, forgive me for interrupting you. We're heading towards 4 minutes, so can I ask you to draw to a close? Thank you.
Okay, yes, my last bit. Yes, so the new charges will send even more visitors away, and the council really needs to think hard about what it wants for Barry Island long term, because the Gavin and Stacey effect won't last forever, and they need to start looking at what other resorts are doing to attract people, not sending them away. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osborne. Please do stay on camera while I just check. Are there any committee members that want to clarify any points with Mr. Osborne? Mr. Hooper, Councillor Hooper.
Can I just clarify? This probably isn't Mr. Osborne to answer, but someone just in terms of the act that was referenced, whether that is what Mr. Osborne said was accurate in terms of what it can be used for, because that was slightly different than what Colin said earlier. So I think we need to know that.
We'll pick that up within the debate, Councillor Hooper. Yeah. Any other points of clarification for Mr. Osborne from committee members? No. In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Osborne, for your contribution this evening.
All right. Thank you.
Can I ask you to switch your camera and your microphone off? Thank you. And now I just want to see if there are any non-committee members that want to comment or ask any questions in relation to the issue of on-street parking. I know there are some councillors that have indicated that they want to speak. You're welcome to come in at this, non-committee members who've indicated they want to speak, you're welcome to come in at this point or wait until the whole report has been presented. If you do want to speak at this point, please do indicate. No, I'm sorry, members of the public are not able to address the committee from the public gallery. I'm sorry. I'm afraid if you wish to address committee, you have to register to speak in advance. I don't see any non-committee members. Councillor Charles, you want to address committee, and just to remind you, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, got me. Thank you. Yes, I don't mind being the first councillor to speak. As a councillor of Barry, I wish to comment on changes being considered relating to car parking in Barry Town and elsewhere, on behalf of the residents that have contacted me with their relevant concerns. The car park by the library and the multi-storey car park are the only car parks in the town centre. Car parking in Barry is already a problem for residents and businesses too. The library car... Sorry, is somebody speaking over me? I can hear somebody speaking.
No, it's fine. Please carry on, Councillor
Okay, thank you. The library car park is often full and the multi-storey car park is the nearest safe parking area available, without causing the residents problems because of street parking. You say the advantages for the council are closing existing car parking areas and charging for parking will help finances. However, the cost of implementing the proposed plan will be considerable. Has the council established at what point in the future the council will start to see a return for their investment? But the disadvantages to the council will be congested streets and possible accidents. Residents no longer use Barry Town Centre or Barry Island. Visitors not attracted to Barry Town Centre or other areas. Businesses lose customers, businesses close, council lose business income, more empty business units lying unused and deteriorating. Potential for more vandalism, graffiti, and potential for illegal use of empty properties for drug growing, an existing problem already. Loss of income because of empty business units and leading to a failing Barry town. Disadvantages to residents and employees, however, are car parking for residents in their streets. Lack of car parking for employees in town means street parking taken up or long walk from parking elsewhere. Residents avoid coming into Barry, so travel to easier parking areas for all their shopping. Holton Road school employees need staff parking and use the multi-storey car park. What needs to be considered by this committee is everything I previously mentioned and weigh up the cost of introducing street parking meters or paying for a parking company to manage parking areas against loss of business, rental to council. Deterioration of empty business buildings and the years before profit can be made. Why bring in measures that will discourage customers, cause residents more aggravation, and disadvantage small businesses that have at last taken up spare business units in the town, making it worthwhile coming into Barry again? Residents are naturally upset over lack of transparency caused by lack of consultation with all relevant stakeholders. Perception of contempt by the Council for local traders and residents of the Vale in relation to this plan. I know that traders have tried to engage with our new MP in this important local issue for help, but have received no response. It appears that having to pay increased minimum wage and increased national insurance contributions by the left Labour government, they have also been attacked by the Vale of Glamorgan Council by means of the deterrent to local residents who will now find it advantageous to shop out of town and visit other places for their recreation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I ask officers to respond to the issues that have been raised in this, can I invite committee members who want to, if there are any committee members who want to ask any questions or make any comments in relation to this aspect of the report. Councillor Norman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. I just want to make a comment, suggestion about a comment that Miles made earlier on about encouraging people to leave cars at home and use public transport. Well, unfortunately, in the rural Vale, public transport is a very rare occurrence. And for some of us, getting back and forth to Barry on public transport is very, very difficult. We need extra parking. Barry needs people to go in to the town centre and shop, not going to the out-of-town areas. And by putting parking charges everywhere, and especially knocking down the Court Road multi-storey, which a lot of people rely on, I think is very disadvantageous to the cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So let's draw some of these issues together before I bring other committee members in to talk about this issue, because I'm conscious we're starting to get quite a list of issues and I don't want to lose them all. Officers, perhaps you could respond to that specific point raised by Councillor Norman. And we've also had some concern about the absence of traffic surveys at Barry Island and questions also about at what point will the council see a return on investment. So let's pick up those issues at this stage, then I'll bring in other committee members and we'll make sure we don't lose any of the issues that have been raised. So I don't know who wants to take those. Colin, Miles? Thank you.
Could I just clarify, Chair? Can we pick up the points relating to Court Road, multi-storey car park, and the parking elements of Barry when we finish that element of the report?
Yes.
So we can present the slides on the proposal at that point.
Yes, we'll make sure that they're not lost, Councillor.
The next point, I think probably best to refer back to Mr. Osborne's point in respect of the legislation. And it is quite a relevant point. I think I did cover it on the slides briefly, and it is in respect of the Road Traffic Regulation Act and Traffic Management Act. And there are conditions on what a council can spend that car parking income on. As we did prior to this proposal, in earlier years, we sought a legal advice to make sure that the income that we were collecting from car park charges went into the appropriate areas that we were able to spend in, such as transportation, elements of highway maintenance, etc. And likewise, we've done the same on this proposal, and we will ensure that the money that is invested back into those areas are compliant with that legislation.
Thank you. So, hang on just 1 second. Thank you. So there was also the issue of the lack of traffic surveys, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Hooper, to check that that's covered your point. But let's just take this second issue first, please.
Okay, so in respect of surveys, other than the original consultation and reports undertaken, there has been no significant survey undertaken as part of this proposal, but there has been some desktop reviews, which has helped form the basis of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Champion, I know you're waiting, but I just want to check with Councillor Hooper. Has that addressed your question? Then please do reiterate it.
Can I, Mr. Osborne specifically talked about that congestion needed to be in place for road traffic, these road traffic regulations to be in place. Can you either confirm that that's the case or not, please, Colin? Thank you.
I think congestion is one of the elements. The idea of the proposal is to push cars into the main car parks to ease congestion around the areas at the front of the resort. It's not the only element relating to the legislation, but it will make up part of that proposal.
What are the others?
Councillor Hooper, I know.
But what are the others, though, Chair?
Councillor Hooper, we're going to have a debate in an orderly manner, so please do come in through the chair. There are other councillors who are also waiting to speak. If that hasn't answered your question, then I'll give you another chance to clarify exactly what it is that you're wanting the officer to clarify, and then I'm going to bring in the next committee member.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a position being placed by a member of the public that relates to the legislation that we're talking about. And what I think this, given this is what we're talking about at the moment, there's going to be other points I think that requires clarity. So congestion is one thing. What are the other things? Otherwise, we're just talking, you're just checking, we're not answering the question, frankly.
Sorry, Councillor, but just for a point of clarification, the income that is collected from car parks can use for that as one point of view, also for other environmental benefits, passenger and local transport, also parts of highway infrastructure. Probably street lighting is something you could do. The legislation is quite broad in its detail, and also local facilities as well, was all covered within those acts that the money can be used for. And I think in the details in the slide that I quoted, there are elements of services that we provide. I think I quoted £911,000 at the moment that we're subsidising, that comes under the Act that we could use that money for. And it was purely to highlight the amount of money this car parking income would generate would perhaps not go near to what the amount of money that we subsidise those areas of service.
Thank you, Colin. So Councillor Hooper, I'm going to move us on. The answer you've had
is not answering the question.
Well, I think the officer, Councillor Hooper, we're not having an argument about it. The officer has done his best. Thank you. The officer's done his best to give you an answer. You've had the answer. We're not going to spend the whole evening debating this issue. Councillor Champion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a councillor for Cowbridge, and we've had our car park has now got a charge on it, having been free for years. It does have a couple of hours that's free, and I just wonder whether the officers have, a couple of the speakers have mentioned whether it's free for an hour or more for locals, and I just wonder whether the officers have actually considered that, because I think it might be a very good thing for the locals.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think that issue was also raised by one of the members of the public who spoke, who said, has consideration been given to seasonal charging on street, and also has consideration been given to introducing either 1 or 2 hour free parking? So it would be helpful. Miles, if you could pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to state that the on-street charges are linked to the off-street. So if you were to give 2 hours free on-street, that would be the parking position of choice, whether that be for residents or visitors of the Vale. So we're trying to encourage people to go to the car parks. That's primarily why the charging on-street is slightly higher than the car parks. So if you were to offer a free period, then you probably could increase congestion. And just to answer that point, we are aware there's significant congestion at Barry Island at peak times. I've lived in the town all my life. One of the principles of the legislation is to relieve congestion or to prevent it. So it is hoped that by charging on street, we will push more cars into the car park and encourage cars and people who come to Barry Island perhaps to come on the train or use alternative means of transport. So it is hoped that it would relieve congestion. I don't think anyone can argue that on a busy day at Barry Island, it is very congested around those areas that we're suggesting, and similarly in Penarth.
Thank you, Miles. Any other committee members who want to come in on this issue of on-street parking? Councillor Hooper.
I just want to prick up, because this is, so we're splitting the thing down, so I want to talk at each section. Is that okay, Chair? I don't want to just...
Absolutely. This is in recognition of the fact that some people here are particularly concerned about a particular proposal within the report, but it's important for committee members to feel that they can address all the issues at any point during the debate.
Okay. So I think it's worth not forgetting the points that have been made by people who've taken the time out of their business days and evenings to come and talk to us about why things are important today. And I think it's just the context really surprised me. So Laura's point, who's left us now, unfortunately, that she thinks she will have to close her business if this comes down, needs reiterating. So I'm reiterating that. I think Louis, when he talked about the fact that this has changed, Barry Island has changed from a seasonal resort to an out-of-season resort, and the fear that that will go back to where it was before is a point of massive concern for people of Barry. The other point that Louis made was about trust, and this was referenced again later on, is that there's a trust issue here. So there's a concern that if charges are laid a certain way, will they come back and be changed at a later point? Trust is lost. So I think people here, even if they get approved today, there will be a point where they say in 2 years' time, do we expect to see things different? I think Matt has given us the answer. So he's talked about the fact that there was a 30% drop in trade. There's subsequently now, which seems to be the finished article, a 20% drop of trade. And it's meant that his shop, his business is closed 5 days. Sorry, he's closed 2 of the days it used to be open, and almost 30% drop in hours. So that consequently is a labour issue, so it'll affect people and what they can earn. And I think the last point, and we have spent some time on this, so I'm not going to go over this again, but I think we need to be clear about the congestion issue, and to find out that we're talking about congestion being Miles's view because he's been there, whereas there's no traffic survey apart from a desktop exercise, is frankly ludicrous. And I think we need to move on to a different place. We either deal with facts or we deal with opinions. My opinion is that Barry Island is rarely congested, and I live there.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just pick up some of those issues with officers? I think you made reference to the fact that there's an equality impact assessment which has been already completed. Can I clarify that? So my expectation would be an equality impact survey would also would identify the potential impact on traders and local residents. So has that been incorporated within the work that's been done? Picking up on the concerns that traders have raised with us and also the issues that Councillor Hooper has raised.
Chair, I think that the purpose of the equality impact assessment is to look at protective characteristics. So essentially, we've looked at the people who could be vulnerable in relation to this. So it wouldn't look at the concerns of traders as such. It would look for those who would have protected characteristics. So we've done one for car parking, we've done one for Court Road, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I will offer an observation, if I may, at this stage. I think when major changes are proposed and come before scrutiny, it's really helpful if a quality impact assessment has been undertaken for that to be included, because it's important information for committee members to consider. Councillor Iannucci Williams, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I was wondering on the parking displacement. So you said that I know this won't necessarily be part of the impact assessment that has done that we haven't seen. Have we done any assessment on the parking displacement that we're expecting for people, particularly like so Marie Curie have been in touch with us. People who need to visit Marie Curie do not need their lives made any harder. And I'm concerned that if we haven't assessed what the likely impact is of the displacement before we need to agree this tonight, that is something that it would be enormously difficult for us to commit to. And I don't know whether that has been done as part of the EIA. But also I would question why we're being asked to support something that we haven't seen an EIA for. If it exists, why don't we have it so that we've got all of the available information to make a decision?
Who'd like to pick that up? Miles, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and Chair, I accept the point about the EIA, Chair, and we will make sure that is available to this committee. Do you mind? Could I ask Councillor Iannucci just repeat the first question for me, Chair? Do you mind?
Councillor Iannucci Williams, I think you were talking about displacement, but if you could clarify, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so specifically, so I know that a response that came to Marie Curie said that the impact of the displacement would be reviewed. But obviously that is once the changes have already been implemented. I'm wondering whether we have done anything to survey that in advance and whether that is done as part of an EIA or how we could possibly sort of look at that, because it's obviously difficult to agree that this would be fine if we don't know what the damage will be.
Thank you, Chair.
Miles, thank you.
Councillor Iannucci, just apologies. Yeah, again, I would reiterate the issue about the equality impact assessment is to look at protected characteristics, so it wouldn't look at displacement. Paragraph 2.37 in the report deals with that point. The issue with parking displacement, what cars will do if they're charged, is difficult to establish because you don't know until you do it. So what we would do is we would monitor the nearby streets after the introduction. What we've said to Marie Curie is what we would say to others. If there is an obvious problem, then we have other measures we could look at, such as resident parking schemes. But we need to implement the changes first and see what happens. It could be that the displacement doesn't happen in the way that people think. It could be that people move to public transport or alternative means or park further away. You're chasing your tail a little bit if you're trying to establish what that'll be before you do it, because it's not an exact science by any means. We've got some ideas of what could happen, but because we'll be likely put it in restricted parking areas, which will cost money, we would rather do the surveys when charging is in and then implement it afterwards and make sure that it's correct.
Councillor Iannucci Williams, did you want to come back in on that?
Yes, please. So if we introduce it and the outcome is bad for people, who need to visit Marie Curie. What is the process for undoing that?
Yeah, please, Miles.
Chair, one option would be to look at some form of resident controls in our street, where they would have a number of permits. That's just one option. We would just need to see the nature of what's happening there, and then, as we've said to the home, we will look at measures should they be affected. They are quite some way away from the current restrictions, so we're hopeful that won't be the case. But when it does happen, we will look at that, and then it's likely that some form of residential control measure could be introduced.
Thank you. Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everybody who has come here today. The 5,000 people who've signed a petition, the 300 plus emails. Everybody in this room would not want to see any of your traders going out of business. We do not want to see our streets become even more quiet and deserted than they are now. So please believe that that is how everybody would feel about this position. It's clear to me that though we may have done an equality impact assessment and we're looking at protected characteristics, we need to do more work to assess the impact on our traders, on the trade, the type of businesses, the type of people that use these businesses, the amount of time they spend in these businesses. I think we need to look at compromise on this. It's very difficult for elected members like myself to explain possibly to residents and to businesses, when you are elected to do this role, you're here to represent your views, but we're also here to protect the services that you depend on so much, with a budget that every year gets smaller and smaller. So it's a very, very difficult tightrope to walk on. But we need to compromise. We need to work with you. We are here to listen to you. And I think if we consider the impacts first and go forward from there, I think we'll be able to come to some solution that's going to benefit all of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ernest, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm putting these points to Miles. Miles, I'm looking particularly at the letter that we've all had from Marie Curie, because of the issues that colleagues around the chamber have already raised. But they have staffing, a considerable number of staffing go to Marie Curie, and they're faced with the prospect of up to £10 a day if they have to pay to park. Clearly, at £50 or £60 a week, that's out of the question. But it's not only staff, it's the visitors. A huge number of visitors go to Marie Curie. The very nature of the services that they operate demand that people, not only immediate family, but even relatives as well, visit there. The area is already congested. If you go through the Marine Parade, I know it very well, Marine Parade, Park Road, Bridgman Road, Holmesdale Place, it is congested now at this time without any restrictions at all. And I'm sure anybody else from Penarth would concur with that. But it's not only the visitors, it's not only the staff, it's the patients, because there are outpatients who visit there. They have to go there on a regular basis, mainly daily, weekly, whatever. I'm not particularly conversant with what, but that is additional parking. And of course, you've got the volunteers. The whole nature of Marie Curie is that a lot of it depends on unpaid volunteers who give unpaid time, unpaid commitment to the work of the hospice. And they are all in the immediate firing area of these restrictions that the council is placing on it. Can you just respond to me on those points, please, Miles? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think there's issues to pick up from Councillor Prothero around a sense that more work needs to be done to understand impact. It'd be helpful to understand how that can happen. I think you've already addressed some of the concerns about the impact specifically on Marie Curie, but if there's anything you want to add, please do. We've then got Councillor Elliott Penn, and I can't see any other committee members wanting to come on this. I'm going to give the leader the opportunity to comment, and then we're going to move on to the next section of the report. I'm just going to remind everybody that doesn't mean we can't come back to this issue at any point during the debate. But officers, if you'd like to respond to those issues, please.
Chair, if I deal with the impact issue first in terms of on street, the impact is you can currently park for 2 hours in these locations for free if you can find a space. The hope is there'll be greater turnaround because there's a charging regime, and some people will choose to use the car park, some people will choose to use other means. You can park for longer than 2 hours, which you won't be able to if you park there today because the restrictions end at 2 hours. So there is a charge for the 2 hours. I can't get away from that. £2.50 for 2 hours. You're unlikely to get a cup of coffee over Barry Island for that. So in terms of the impact, you can park for longer because you can park for up to 4. To address one of Councillor Ernest's points, there's no £10 charge. It's a maximum 4 hours, £6, and the charge is not proposed anywhere near the Marie Curie Hospital. And I will make the point again that if that hospital suffers as a result of displacement, even though it does have its own car park, and might add has a small car park of its own, we will look to address their concerns. But the car park charging is the very bottom of Bridgeman Road, some distance from the hospital. So in terms of impact, I hear what the traders are saying. It's not that we're ignoring that by any means, but we do hope that we'll get a greater turnaround of spaces than is currently the case, where people are parked for considerable lengths of time and not moving. And these aren't necessarily people spending their money in the shops.
Thank you, Miles. Councillor Penn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's spoken tonight, and I totally share your concerns. And we, despite some social media stuff, we do actually listen. I've also had some concerns about the scheme. I've built up quite a good relationship with some of the traders on the front during my time organising the Downhill Derby, which has brought in tens of thousands of people over the years to Penarth and to the Esplanade, all on foot because the Esplanade's closed. So it is possible to get large numbers of people down the front on foot. It's been proven that people on foot spend more money as well than people who arrive in cars. I'd really like to see an initial free parking period, as has been mentioned by others. So if people were just stopping for an hour, they get the free hour. I don't know how this would be implemented, or the actual the practical nature of doing that. I'd really like to see any scheme brought in should be done with a set review period. So once the summer season is over, as has been stated, I think Wilmore's saw a drop off sort of October period. That once the summer period is over, then a review is undertaken, and that any data collected should be used to make any changes, evidence-based changes. And if those scheme is shown to have a negative impact, that be addressed as well with the changes. As Councillor Prothero states, we do live within an ever-shrinking budget world, and we do need to find ways to help bolster budgets. And there's also been mentioned in the report and in some of the correspondence that people are staying for longer than the 2 hours on the promenade, which does not help with turnover of visitors. Actually has a negative impact because there's less car parking spaces because some cars are parked there for hours on hours. And this has a negative effect on getting more people to the promenade. Yeah, my points are, let's have a proper review and evidence-based changes, and possibly look at the implementing a initial free period, as has been mentioned by other councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, did you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to come in right at the end, but I think that in terms of this, it might be helpful if I provide some context. As Miles said, this goes back to 2013, an awful lot of this conversation. And as a fairly new cabinet member in those days for Regeneration, which included tourism, involved in the regeneration of Barry Island at that time, working on our concept of whole town regeneration, which we published a number of articles on. I was aware that the reports that came forward in 2013, most of the parking type reports were produced purely from a highways perspective. There was a lot of silo working, but it was easy to realise that simplistic solutions weren't appropriate. We knew that there needed to be a diversified approach in different areas and that we needed to look at solutions. So there were multiple reports. I won't bore you with that, but I could because I've got them all here. In 2013, we also reintroduced parking enforcement officers because when the police stepped back from that, everybody thought everybody would behave and that they would respect disabled spaces, zigzag lines, that sort of thing. And heaven forbid they didn't. It was mayhem in 2013 in terms of parking. So we had to bring in enforcement officers. So I just park that there. In 2015, because we'd parked the work, there was another report in about 2015, but actually we brought it to ENR and it still was very siloed. It wouldn't work. So in 2016, there was a cabinet report which was not progressed. In 2018, we were no longer in power, but there was a cabinet report that actually went back and virtually reiterated the reports of 2013, which we'd refused. There was a report on the 2nd of July 2018. It came to ENR in July, it went to Corporate Performance and Resources, and it went to Cabinet. I spoke at every meeting I was able to. All my contributions are a matter of public record. They're also on my social media. As a consult, I actually said, you should not consult on this. This is a flawed report. However, on the 30th of July, I did say that it would be appropriate to charge for parking in some locations because of a diversified approach. We did that in 2019. At that point, it became a campaign for many people. But as I said, we were actually fighting it in 2018. I spoke again at every single scrutiny committee. There were no changes. And in April 2019, I spoke again at the 2 scrutiny committees, and that was all published as well. It's still available online, my thoughts on that. Then in July 2019, those reports came back. It was quite interesting to be in Cabinet and speaking about reports that I'd actually spoken on when I was a scrutiny member. So at that point, we decided that it needed to be stopped, and it was for full review, and it was the Cabinet reference at that time. And then came the report that is mentioned at the beginning of this report, which references the guiding principles for car parking, that recognises that the issues around car parking are multifaceted, that there are many different needs of our communities. There are needs of town centres, there are needs of resorts, and we need to look at all those. And it's worth reading that. It talks about protecting residents, charging visitors. It talks about having a diversified approach. It's where we brought forward the 2 shoppers' car parks to increase turnover of spaces in Cowbridge and Barry, and they have worked. We talked about annual permits, which were introduced, and we talked at that stage about no on-street parking. Since that day, since 2020, there have been regular reviews of how things are working, and there have been changes. They are incremental, they are iterative. So in 2021-22, there were changes to the on-street layout and timings in Barry Island and Penarth. They were as a result of people staying for far too long and increasing the disabled access in those spaces. In 2023-24, we introduced what we had long tried to do, which was tiered car parking charges. For those of you that were around, we actually used to have 1 hour and 6 hour or all day parking, £1, £6. It's now tiered. We did that not knowing if we would lose money on it because it was the right thing to do.
Councillor Vinette, forgive me interrupting you. You're at 5.5 minutes and we're only
Can
able
I
to
finish
allow
the last
5
line?
minutes. Please
the
do.
one last line.
Please do.
And so in 2025, the proposals you see before you are as a result of on the abuse of the on-street parking spaces if we want to get turnover. Now, we will take these back. We are listening. We will take them back and consider it. But when we've got people writing to us saying that their staff are parking all day in 2-hour spaces, then we have to see what we can do to get turnover of those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson, as the Cabinet Member, did you want to come in? I'm going to give you the last word on this issue. Councillor Godfrey, I can see you've got your hand up, but I'm going to move us on to the next section of the report. So you'll have an opportunity to speak on this issue, but I do want to move us on.
Thank you very much,
Wilson,
Chair.
Please.
I mean, I think one of the points that hasn't been looked at today so far is the notion of churn. And I think churn is really important here. When we get cars staying a long period of time, I do question why are they for a long period of time. And clearly, if there were some sort of measures be used, we can encourage more people to visit the Esplanade, to visit the island and to park. And I think one of the issues that I've seen when I visited the island and visited the Esplanade is finding somewhere to park, okay, in an ideal location. And I think that's something that we do need to be looking at, because actually I think that would benefit an awful lot of businesses. And I did some ballpark calculations myself fairly recently and identified that based upon, you know, say for instance, I'll be hypothetical because I don't know how many employees in Barry Island, but say for instance there was 150 and there was around about 50. I worked out that basically by them moving to the car park up to the town, to the top, the cliff top car park in Penarth and the Harbourview ones in Barry, you know, okay, we generate a bit of revenue because it's £2 a week, £100 a year, those fees, and you know, and that would help. But equally though, it would mean that those people, so instead of parking in prime locations in Barry Island and the Esplanade, they will then free up those spaces for customers. And clearly, to me, I see that as a great benefit for the traders and for the general, you know, people to walk around and exercise more often and they've got access. And the other point I would like to point out is that early in the morning, you know, our plans at the moment are obviously free for people who want to walk early in the morning, take their dog for an exercise. That is free for the first 2 hours. But I'm here, I would like to emphasise to the traders here, and thank you for coming, is I'm here in listening mode. You know, I'm taking back your views and I understand where you're coming from. I get it. But equally though, I've also got a budget that I've got to look at as well. And I think that's something that I'm responsible for. You mentioned that, you know, Miles, the director, mentioned £2.5 million. I got a challenge, you know, I got a huge budget challenge there. And so, you know, I got to square that, you know, and that's something that I got to be thinking about as well. But I really appreciate you coming along and hearing your views.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you all for what I think has been a really helpful debate on that aspect of the report. And as I've said at the beginning of the meeting, I'll sum up at the end because I think it's important that we have the context for the whole report. So, Colin, can I invite you to take us through the next issue, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there are only 2 slides in relation to off-street car parking proposals, following on from the first part of the presentation. So this proposes off-street charging car parks at the following locations: Cliff Walk, Penarth, Bronnermoor, Barry, Coldnap, Barry, West Farm, Southern Down and Portobello, Ogmore by Sea. And then future consideration, but subject to a further report for Lantut Major, with ongoing discussions with the Town Council on community asset transfers, and to look at the elements of the beach which are subject to tidal issues, should I say, in that environment, which is an made car park, and it is subject to rocks and boulders coming over regularly, and wouldn't be suitable for charging. Likewise, the car park at Penarth Marina wouldn't be considered viable. So similar table to the on-street car parking proposals. So we estimate income, possible income of 220,000, based on an existing charging schedule, but times as amended from Cabinet 9th of January 2025, and in the bottom right-hand corner is the illustration of the arrangements. So the parking length will be up to 2 hours at £2, up to 3 hours £4, up to 4 hours £6, and parking all day at £8. And the amendment changed the times from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. start, up to 2300 hours. So likewise, it's we did 3 calculations on 10%, 12% midpoint, and 15%, which is the likelihood we think the income could raise, and that's where the 220,000 comes from, and it is for those 5 car parks that as detailed in there. Okay, Chair, and that is to conclude the car parking charges proposals.
Thank you very much, Colin. I don't think we're joined by any members of the public who want to speak on this specific issue, but can I just check that in terms of those? I'm sorry, you're only able to speak once. In terms of the remaining speakers, did either of you want to address this specific issue? No, I think you both want to talk about Court Road closure. In which case, can I see if there are any non-committee members who want to speak on this issue? Councillor Russell Godfrey, please. Councillor Russell Godfrey, apologies. Do you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. The point I wanted to raise was with regards to the Marie Curie Hospice, which is obviously a very sensitive place, and people can be very, very emotional for people visiting. And my suggestion is that quite similar to numerous other hospitals and businesses, that a machine was put inside the hospice where you have to input your registration number, and then you can identify that you're actually visiting the hospital, and then it could be, I think at the Heath Hospital is 6 hours, and then you have to put your number in again or something. And I think at least that would take the stress away from people, that it's, as I say, it's an emotional place to visit anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I think parking in Heath Hospital, there is no charge and there's no requirement to enter registration. Neither is there anymore in Barry Hospital. I would imagine that suggestion would be a matter for Marie Curie. I don't know if officers want to pick up on that suggestion. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, as Miles mentioned earlier, there is no proposal to put car parking charges anywhere near Marie Curie Hospital. And if there is any displacement or it affects that hospital, we'll look at the measures to ensure that that's corrected. I don't know if Marie Curie want to do their own sort of parking arrangements, but that's not within our proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Chief Officer, did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, just I think to clarify what Councillor Godfrey meant, I don't know what was in his mind exactly, but I think what he meant was in Heath Hospital, you don't pay for car parking, but if you stay longer than a certain amount of time, you're able to insert your vehicle plate. So I think that's possibly what he intended.
Thank you for that clarification, and apologies, Councillor Godfrey, if I misunderstood your suggestion. Any other non-committee members who want to talk about this issue? Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Chair. I come in here because on the list I see Bronamore Car Park and Coldnap Car Park, two tourist but also well-loved areas for residents of Barry and the Vale to visit. The Bronamore Car Park specifically
also caters to a number of local businesses, which are reliant, as coffee shops, restaurants, and a small newsagent, grocers, are reliant on small, short-term drop-ins. So I am concerned with the charge there that would not aid those businesses at all. Also, of course, it's been long overdue for tarmacking. It's been in a horrendous state for years, absolutely years. And it now seems like the only way that we can get this tarmacked is by charging for it, whereas it's been a travesty, I think, that it's been allowed to go on so long and remain in the state it is. I also want to bring up, though, the issue I heard earlier about the on-street car parking on Barry Island, and how that we would hope that because of the charging regime that we have in the set car parks there, that it would be cheaper and easier and better for people to use those rather than remain in the new proposed on-street car park charging areas of the town. Now, I fully understand and agree that the tourist needs to pay. If they're going to come here and see our wonderful town and Barry Island and Cosmoston and other places like that, then they should contribute. And I fully agree with that. However, I am at a loss to understand where a visitor, a tourist visitor, would take the opportunity to go into an on-street car parking space and not go to the car park if they do not know and not told the difference between the charging regimes and how it works. So I'd like to understand how that would be explained to them in order to make that a success. Season tickets can work, but I don't think that they would fully aids the position of car parking in our tourist areas. I really don't. And my final comment really is to the Cabinet member, Councillor Wilson. He said on a number of times now he's in listening mode, and I'm grateful for that. We're all here to listen, we're all here to learn, and we're all here to try and understand what the proposals are. If he is in listening mode, I think he should have heard by now that there is a great deal of anger, concern, and economic potential vandalism that's going to happen in our town centres. Therefore, if he is listening, perhaps he'd take this opportunity to explain if he's going to withdraw and take these proposals back to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So if I can ask officers to respond to those points. My understanding from the report, I'll bring committee members in a moment, Councillor. My understanding from the report is that the report acknowledges that there's a need to do resurfacing work in Bronamore, and also picking up your point earlier, Clifftop. It'd be helpful if you could clarify the intention is for that work to be completed prior to charging being introduced. And then if I understand your point, Councillor Hodge, you're questioning whether or not the introduction of a free period of parking at Barry Island would actually undermine the use of paid car parking spaces because visitors wouldn't know that it was there. So if you'd like to pick up on those points, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing to say that the surface difference in both Bronamore and Clifftop was picked up in the report. I can't guarantee that the work will be done if charges introduced prior, because the budget hasn't yet been set, and we're still waiting on information from Welsh Government as to whether we will have additional money for highways resurfacing, but that very much is our plan. Just to say, the car park surface is safe in as much as it's inspected, and it is filled if it has deviations over a certain level. So. And I'm not trying to be clever here. We have a legal duty to deal with this land, and we do that by scheduled inspection and repair. That doesn't say that in a few weeks after we've been there, it doesn't deteriorate to some degree, because it's not got a finished surface. So I'm not in any way going to argue that the surface in those car parks is good, but it is recognised that that work needs to be done. If people are paying to park, there's an expectation that they be on a safer surface. So I think that is recognised. As regards information, I think Councillor Hodges was alluding to the fact that people who visit the area will not know the differential in charging between on-street and off-street. Well, we would do that via our website and signage. That's all we can do. And if they come more than once, then they may well pick that up because they've obviously experienced paying slightly more on street. But that's what we aim to do, Chair. We do it via our website and via signage. The information will also be posted up on the meters. And if our signage needs changing to direct people better into the car parks, that's what we'll have to do. At the moment, people are using Nels Point as a car park of first choice. That's not how we'd hoped they would do. We'd hope they'd use Harbour Road first and then Nels Point. So we'll have to do some work around that to make sure we direct visitors particularly to the car parks rather than on street. So it is, I accept Councillor Hodges' point. They will not know unless we tell them. So we'll update our website and improve our signage in that regard.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you on this issue of the state of the car parks, because the report specifically says in 217 that work will be required to improve the surface of Cliff Walk car park prior to charging. It doesn't make that same commitment for Bronner Moor. I just want to clarify, so is there a commitment that work would need to be done to improve the surface in Cliff Walk prior to charging, and there is no need to do that in Bronner Moor? Why is there a difference between those two issues?
Chair, there's not meant to be a difference. It's the same. We recognise that charging for car parking residents will require a better space, so we would look to do that prior to charging. My only issue I've got at the minute is the budget hasn't been set, but that is my aspiration for both, and it's not one or the other.
Thank you. Any other non-committee members wanting to come in on this issue before I bring committee members in? No? OK. In that case, Councillor Norman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up a lot has been said about encouraging people to come into the town, visitors, shoppers, tourists, but not a lot has been said about the poor people who have to pay to park, who work in the town. And a lot of these people use off-street parking because, for a start, the main car park behind the library is not open until 9:30. A lot of people, shops open at 8:30, 9 o'clock. And a lot of these people have to use off-street parking. If they start bringing charges in, well, surely the people who work there will be penalised for coming to work. So can something be done to assist these people, please?
Thank you. And I think that probably cuts to a wider point about whether or not there'll be a review of any other car parks were any of these changes to be implemented. Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, there's no proposals to change it to any of the town centre car parks and charging regime.
Thank you. Councillor Iannucci-Williams, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, why are the costs different in each of these proposals? So I think for the, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the suggestion that up to 2 hours will be either £2 or £2.50, but the on-street parking up to 2 hours is either £2 or £2.50. They looked to be different, and then both of those are different to what we currently do in Wyndham Street, which is free for 2 hours. So I just wondered if you could explain why we're charging differently for the first 2 hour period where we are going to charge.
Colin or Miles, who would like to pick that up?
Chair, I'll answer that. I'm working from half a set of glasses, unfortunately, I just broke them. Don't feel sorry for me, only £2. Chair, it's a good point, but I think the leader made this point. We differentiate between town centre charges and our coastal resorts. So there's a free 2 hour period in Wyndham Street and in Cowboys to encourage the short term shopper stays. So that's the reason for that differential. No plans to change that. And the reason for the differential between on street and off street on coastal is to encourage off street to be used first. So it's to reduce congestion, relieve congestion by getting people off the street into the car park. So that's the primary reason for the differential in charging. And the charges proposed in the off-street car parks, just to be clear, they are the current charges for our chargeable off-street coastal car parks. Hopefully that made sense, Chair.
It does to me, Miles, and I'm sure Councillor Minucci-Williams will let us know if she has any further queries. Councillor Ernest, please.
Yes, Chairman, can I just make a point first? I'm finding this meeting very disjointed. We seem to be jumping from one side to the other, here backwards and forwards, and I, as a member, finding it quite difficult keeping up with it. I'm sure for our friends in the gallery, they're probably mystified. Let me come to the point. These are questions of clarification at this stage, Chairman. Talking about the Clifftop car park at Penarth, Miles, one of the issues there is going from the Esplanade area to the Clifftop car park involves a steep incline, a steep hill. Now, we're looking at those with disabilities and we're asking them to go to the Clifftop car park to create the churn that you rightly or wrongly talk about. And yet the transport, for example, between them is abysmal. There's one bus an hour and no bus, I believe, on a Sunday. I was going to touch on this later. So if, for example, on a Sunday, you want to adopt the premise that Miles and his team are putting forward, on a Sunday, you can go to Clifftop car park and then you have to walk down. If you're in a wheelchair, you'll be wheeled down the road. If you were walking stick, you'll be using a walking stick because there's no other way you can get round it. That's where it's slightly different to the surface car parks in Barry, and I give way to my friends on their particular issues. Again, as regards Clifftop car park, there is no lighting at night time. So after sundown, which typically 3:30, 3:45 in the depths of winter, there is no lighting. It is actually quite a dark place, and Matt has referred to that earlier, but I reinforce that because there have been a lot of instances, for example, of young people doing wheelies in the car park. The car park's in a terrible state. I drove over there only yesterday to check it out, and there are a lot of potholes. And of course, the only facilities are toilets, which quite frequently are out of action. The other point I wanted to raise, and my last point for the moment, Chairman, is the additional costs of changing the regulations if they would come into force. It's thousands and thousands of pounds to advertise, put down yellow lines, put plates and signage in place, and then 6 months later, you revisit them on the review that has been promised, and we have to go through the operation again because it's another legal change which requires all the changes to be made. So with respect, I don't think that has been costed in to what has already been given to you. Thank you, Chairman, for that.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'm sorry that you're struggling with the format of our debate this evening. The intention has been in separating the issues to make it as easy as possible for members of the public. Thank you, I'm speaking. To make it as easy as possible for members of the public who want to contribute to specific aspects of the debate. And as I've made clear repeatedly, elected members can address any of the issues at any stage, but it has been about trying to ensure that we're maximising accessibility for members of the public. But as ever, I'm very happy to receive feedback and to take those comments on board. Officers, Miles, thank you.
Chair, there's no real change to those who've got ability problems in terms of the suggestion, because if you're a blue badge holder, you can already park for free on WR lines, and you will be able to park on the Esplanade in the chargeable spaces if that is agreed, free of charge, and you'll also be able to park in a disabled bays, which we would retain. So we're not suggesting charging for disabled or blue badge holders within this report. So they will be able to continue largely parking where they currently are. The hope is there'll be greater turnover in terms of spaces on the front, so they may even have more opportunity to park closer to the amenities. In terms of the traffic regulation order, and yeah, they are expensive to bring in. It's costed within the arrangements for lines and signs. So by review, we would obviously review everything we bring in. We always do that. Should the review result in it being ripped out within 12, 18 months, yeah, there will be a charge. But we've not done that previously. We've tweaked things and changed things around a little bit, but we don't think that the suggestions here will require removal. They may require some work after review, but we believe that they are workable, albeit they may need some tweaking after a period. We mentioned displacement is one issue we'll be looking at. We'll also be looking at usage, times of the day, times of the year, that sort of thing. But I accept the points regarding the costs of putting these in, but we don't often remove them straight following, because we have a 21-day objection period. Should any of this be agreed by Cabinet, where we consider formal objections and we look at all those, and you tend to tease out a lot of the issues in that process, Chair.
Thank you. I hope that addresses your queries, Councillor Ernest. Good. Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair. So on the topic of coastal car parking and paying to park there, my ward of St Bride's Major has beautiful beaches, Ogmore by Sea, and for many years we've had paying to park in the coastal car parks, and in principle I think it absolutely works. For our locals who use the beach on a regular basis, who go surfing, they can have the permits for the year, which are £100 for the year, so they can go any day they want. I think it works quite well for residents. We have 2 additional parking areas that this time round we're looking at charging for. They are both just grassy areas, and in truth, people have been parking there. We've had to pull cars out, to be honest, because it gets wet and they get bogged down. So the prospect of having a proper formal parking area, which we will charge for, but will mean people don't get stuck in the mud, and we can help to manage the antisocial behaviour, the staying overnight, the parties, the fires. I think it's an absolute bonus. The only thing I have asked for assurance of, Miles, is that we have a bit of public consultation before we actually have the designs for these areas, because it was something that residents have asked for. So I just want to check with you and to clarify that we'll be able to do that, because, as said, these areas are already grassy areas. They're not officially car parks. It's an area which also needs permissions from the Dunraven estate, from our commoners who want to have a say as well. So yes, so just looking for that reassurance. Thank you.
Miles, are you able to respond to that?
Chair, there's a bit of a unique situation down in the Western Vale. These 2 car parks, one we closed at COVID time because there were issues, because there's someone lives close by. The other one suffered from some overnight issues and some ASB issues. So these are essentially control measures and subject to a new design for each car park. So, and that will have to go through the planning inspectorate. So I just, my colleague Mike is putting a design together. So I'm quite happy to send that to the local members and get some feedback. I think particularly the resident that lives off Portobello, because that was an issue that the reason we closed the car park was because of issues with that resident. So I see no issue with that, Chair. We're looking to improve matters in those 2 locations. The rest of the area is chargeable, and we have had, we're largely on top of it, but to have a formal order on those car parks will hopefully address the remaining ASB issues, and a better design will stop vehicles getting stuck in it. So I don't see an issue with that request, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hooper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first deal with Bronagh Moor car park, and just to put on the record that I've had representations from there's only 4 businesses that are that front onto Bronagh Moor car park, and 2 of them are Romley's and Romley's 2. And the proprietors there have expressed concern, not dissimilar to what we've heard from Barry Island traders, that they expect to see a potential decrease in their takings in the order of 25 to 30%. So a significant decrease that could involve with them having to reduce their staffing levels, and their overriding concerns of their customers. And had they been here, they would be able to say this, would be that they are 100% against these proposals, which is probably unsurprising. I'm going to echo Councillor Hodges' point that this car park is in a poor state. They've mentioned this before. They've referenced it and asked for the car park to be reviewed. I've got a concern about the trust issue we've already had here, that we're saying, you know, we hope to do the car park. Well, hope doesn't really solve this one, I'm afraid. I think we need to have some sort of certainty as to whether it's happening. Also, and Miles, we've spoken about this on a number of times, the displacement in the Knapp area. We have a number of people who utilise the Watchtower Bay for swimming at high tide, and they park all along the lakeside parking. And I think that this proposal will only make that matter worse. We've spoken previously about the difficulties if there was an emergency, and there has been an emergency, where an ambulance struggled to get to Watchtower Bay to deal with somebody who was in distress on the beach. I think that we're lining ourselves up to a real concern. And if we are doing Bronamore, then what we have to also do is make sure that we police, if that's the right phrase, that we manage the lakeside area, and we manage it. We know when high tide is. You just can get an app and it tells you when high tide is. That's a concern. And finally, I just want to bring up Matt's point, which I feel has been lost, about capacity of the network in the car park there. So the practicalities of how you're going to install one of these or two of these machines in a car park that has no extra capacity, I'd love to know how you're going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you able to pick up those issues, Colin? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. So first of all, the state of the car park, I think Miles has already made that commitment that if this proposal goes through, we'll make this commitment that we will upgrade the facility and make sure the maintenance issues are appropriately addressed. I think you're right. There will be needed, enforcement action will be needed, and that will have to be managed appropriately for that area. I know the area quite well that you mentioned, and there is a lot of congestion and parking all around there, and that will need to be appropriately managed. And just to clarify, the proposal on the machines, they are all solar, so they won't need any sort of electricity supply.
Thank you very much, Colin. And I think the last person who wants to speak on this issue is Councillor Rhys-Thomas. Is that right, Councillor? Well, you can speak now or at the end. What would your preference be? Yep, that's fine. Okay, any other committee members who want to comment or ask any questions on this issue? Leader, do you want to comment on it? Thank you. And then we'll move on to the next section of the report.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a little bit. It was interesting, again, you know, harking back to the 2020 report, there was a differentiation made between car parks that visitors used and car parks that locals used. And the Knapp was one of those ones that was viewed as being a local beach. That since COVID, an awful lot has changed. That the visitor numbers in different areas became huge. The enforcement needs within the Knapp area were absolutely massive, and so the decision was taken that in any beaches that were viewed, any car parks that were viewed as being visitor that could be viewed as being visitor beaches, we would include the whole lot in the charging regime, but include them within the season ticket numbers without a proposed increase in season tickets. I would like to reassure committee members that nobody with a blue badge pays parking charges anyway. They have free access. But we are looking, at the moment, we have a season ticket for resorts, we have a season ticket for country parks. We are looking to see whether or not there is any interest in having a combined season ticket at a discount for those people that have both. They're becoming very popular. And Councillor Hooper mentioned the Watchtower waders. Actually, a large number of those are already season ticket holders. And I'm in regular contact. We do plan actually to bring a report forward to Cabinet in the not too distant future. I can't give a huge, because we haven't finished writing it yet, about the whole area of leisure and the use of our green and blue spaces. And I think that the input of this committee would be very, very useful in that, because yet again, that has changed over the last sort of 3-4 years. So we will be looking at that as well. So just to say that whether you pay on a 6-monthly or 12-monthly basis, you can have total access to our resorts, which will include, if agreed, these additional ones for £2 a week. And it's the perfect way for local people to have very inexpensive staycations with their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask a quick follow-up question on that? Having said I'll move us on, and I promise I will move us on. In terms of the car parking permits, I think it's really good news to hear that there's consideration being given about a universal ticket. And I am conscious, it would be very easy to say that people have got a car and can afford to drive, can afford a season ticket. The reality is that is often not the reality for many people. So if these proposals go ahead, certainly some of the comments that I've been reading are concerns that people's well-being will be affected because they're not going to be able to afford to access the coastal resorts in the way that they do now, because they simply couldn't afford the parking charges and they can't get there any other way. We've heard the reality of challenges with public transport and people who are not able to access that. So are there any other steps that are being considered to ensure that parking permits are affordable for people who might be struggling? And Leader, if you can come in.
I'll come back in. One thing, I'd had a previous conversation, and I know that we'll continue those with the credit union. There is a possibility for some sort of arrangement that people will be able to access a low-cost loan through the credit union to be able to pay. But as I said, 6 months or 12 months. If you only want to go in the summer, you can just buy one for then. If you only want to go in the winter, if you're a dog walker and only want to go on the island in the winter, you can get a 6-month one there. We don't know at the moment, obviously, if you read the corporate plan, the proposed one, that we are looking to increase digitisation of services, whether that offers us any other opportunities in terms of payment schemes. At the moment, admin costs would prohibit less than a sort of 6-monthly one, but we can look at that as we go forward. But I think I need to reflect in terms of affordability. Going back to the earlier conversation, the first proposals that came through on the on-street parking basically meant if you could afford 10 quid a day, you could park all day in the best spaces on Barry Island. We changed that at Cabinet so that it is a 4-hourly turnaround of those spaces, which allows people to be there to have a meal if they wish, rather than just a cup of coffee, but does not allow people to block those spaces all day.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on now to the next issue within the report, which is proposal around the future of Court Road car park. Colin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned, this is a proposal for Court Road, or the future of Court Road multi-storey car park. So the car park has provision for 224 spaces. It is in need of structural works, and we've had a study undertaken, and it's been estimated of just short of £250,000. The revenue costs currently are £89,000 per year, and we anticipate that those will increase to manage the car park. It will require a budget of approximately £700,000 over the next 5 years if that car park was to be retained, and that's based on the revenue cost plus the capital cost required for the structural works. And the current neighbourhood services budget at the moment for this year, 2024-25, is £38,000 in its entirety. The car park is poorly utilised, although we do accept that it is frequently used in terms of the daytime, Monday to Friday particularly. There is a snapshot of a study undertaken in October that's contained in the back of the report in the appendices. And charging hasn't been considered because we don't think it's sustainable due to the high costs associated with managing a car park. And to put that into perspective, the best used car park we have in Cowbridge, which brings in the most income, is 40,000 a year. And the Wyndham Street car park around the corner brings in £10,500 per year. And that's because there's the focus, obviously, with town centre car parks being the first 2 hours free. So just to look at the multi-storey car park on its own. So in the locality, there's Wyndham Street car park. It has less than a capacity of 74 spaces, but it also has low occupancy. There are several locations with unrestricted on-street parking nearby and unrestricted parking along Houghton Road. Within a 0.8 mile radius, it is a desktop study undertaken. There are 21 streets offering unrestricted parking, and it has numerous bus routes, which are quoted in the report and summarised on the slide. And throughout Barry Town and in Wyndham Street car park, there are free 2-hour parking options to facilitate safe drop-offs and pickups, with in mind that it's currently used for some school use, and that would help with congestion. And those are the 2 slides representing the elements of the report for Court Road Depot.
Thank you. We have a number of members of the public who want to speak to us on this issue. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate you doing that. Can I start, please, with Mrs. Claire Cook? Thank you, Mrs. Cook.
The Court Road parking surveys weren't done at peak times. My own count at 11 a.m. found 108 cars, so pretty much 50% occupancy. You say it's expensive to operate as security staff are required to ensure users are safe. The annual cost, $52,500, but nobody I've spoken to has ever seen security. As I walked around the car park, acting pretty suspiciously as I was photographing every floor, nobody approached me. The suggested alternatives for workers, this is not to do with shoppers, currently using Court Road are Wyndham Street, which is too small, doesn't appear to offer season tickets, which are available for workers in other areas. Are season tickets available here, or are people expected to pay a large daily fee? Catch the bus. Have you seen the Civic Centre car park during the day? Those workers certainly don't use the bus, so why would you think town workers would? Please lead by example. Use unrestricted on-street parking, i.e. park in residential streets for 8 or 9 hours at a time. For coastal areas, and I don't disagree with this, there may be some parking displacement because of the new charges, and we will be monitoring to establish if additional parking control measures are required to protect parking residents living nearby. Where is the protection for town residents? When you're telling workers to park outside their homes all day, it's double standards. These streets are narrow and many remain two-way. They're not built to take the extra traffic and lack the capacity for 108 extra parked cars. You will be making these streets dangerous for drivers and pedestrians. You claim that the multi-storey needs £247,000 worth of work during the next 5 years. However, during this period, you will be receiving £10 million for town centre improvements. There's no point in improving a town with no parking, as people won't come. They'll use retail parks or online shopping, and the town will continue to die. I've added, since we've been here, I've heard time and time again officers say they want people to use car parks. Then they want to knock this one down. Strange.
Forgive me interrupting. You're just over your 3 minutes, so if you could draw to a close. Thank you.
Okay. I query if this meeting should ever have taken place without the impact assessment being available. Thank you, and sorry for going over.
No, that's absolutely fine. Do any members of the committee want to clarify anything with Mrs. Cook, please? No, in that case, thank you very much, Mrs. Cook. We move on to the next public speaker. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the committee. Do they look like a friendlier bunch than us? I hope not. Mrs. Louise Slimmings, please, would you like to address the committee? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm speaking this evening to urge the council to reconsider the proposal to close Court Road car park. As a practice manager of Holton Dental Centre, I oversee a busy NHS dental practice that serves Barry and the wider Vale of Glamorgan community. 9 of our dedicated staff rely on this car park for daily parking, along with an average of 40 patients who visit us throughout the day. Our 4 dentists and support team travel from various locations, including Penarth, Lantwick Major and Cardiff. Given that train services to these areas are infrequent and unreliable, I'm concerned that without an alternative parking solution, we risk losing essential staff. As a business, paying business rates, providing NHS services and driving foot traffic to the town centre, we believe the lack of engagement with local businesses in this proposal is both disappointing and concerning. After all, we are taxpayers too, contributing to the local economy. We surveyed our patients on the week of the 20th of January. It showed that 75% of those who visited the practice, a total of 190 out of 255 patients, relied on Court Road car park. That is an average of 38 people per day. Closing this car park without a viable alternative will severely impact our ability to provide essential healthcare services. I was also surprised to read in the proposal that Court Road car park is underused and that users could simply park in the already congested side streets or Wyndham Street car park. However, the data in the proposal is flawed. It only accounted for a limited time frame, mostly pre-business hours, and once during half-term when Holton Primary School was closed. This is not reflective of typical usage. Last week, I personally counted the cars at both Court Road and Wyndham Street car parks at various times of the day. At Court Road, there were an average of 95 cars and Wyndham Street 40. That's a total of 135 cars, but Wyndham Street only has 74 spaces, clearly not enough to accommodate the displaced vehicles. In addition, parking all day in Wyndham Street car park would cost our staff £6.50 a day, leading to an additional financial burden of around £1,500 per year for each of our employees. The town centre traders are already facing challenges with rising service costs, and the proposed closure of Court Road car park will only exacerbate these difficulties. It will likely reduce foot traffic and hurt the overall vibrancy of the town centre, negatively impacting businesses that are already struggling. I urge the council to reconsider these proposals and explore alternative options that will support our NHS dental practice, the staff and visitors of Holton Primary School and the businesses in the town centre.
Thank you very much. Can I check whether or not any committee members want to clarify anything with Mrs. Simmons? Councillor Iannucci-Williams, did you want to make a point of clarification?
No, sorry, I've been too keen for questions. I could put my hand back there.
Fine, thank you. In that case, again, thank you very much for your contribution. And as I said at the beginning, please be assured that we're capturing all the issues and concerns that are being raised through debate in this committee and the various representations that we've received. So we move on now to...
I've got my hand up.
I'm well aware of that, thank you. There are others who are waiting to speak before you. So if you could exercise some patience, I would be really grateful, thank you. There are some councillors who've indicated in advance that they'd like to... Yeah, thank you. I will bring you in. But I'm going to non-committee members, and I'm going to invite Councillor Ian Johnson, if you'd like to address committee, please.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. My name is Councillor Ian Johnson, and I'm a Plaid Cymru councillor.
Forgive me, there is another public speaker who is joining us online, forgive me, and we're going to hear from him first.
Yeah, can I bring up Dr. Ralphs, please? If you're still, if you can come. That's it. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Apologies, I missed you off my list.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just speaking to you just to express my dissatisfaction with the proposal to close the multi-storey car park.
Sorry, Dr. Ralphs. Dr. Ralphs, sorry, the sound's breaking up a bit. I don't know if it's the headphones or...
Yeah.
Can we put the volume down slightly?
Sorry.
Can you try again, Dr. Ralphs?
Yeah, can you hear me there now?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Sorry, yeah. So I'm one of the dentists at Holton Dental Centre working with Louise Slimmings, who's just spoke. And I'm just here to lend support basically to all of the concerns that she's expressed and agree with all the points she's made already. So I'm really concerned regarding the impact the proposal will have on our ability in the practice to provide NHS dental care to the residents of Barry and the rest of the Vale of Glamorgan, as the vast majority of our staff and patients use the car park every day. The proposition that the Wyndham Street car park will be sufficient to accommodate all the people who use Court Road is unrealistic, as there are not enough spaces for all the people who use the car park on a daily basis, let alone the additional annual financial implications of the parking charge in Wyndham Street for full-time workers in the town centre. And also it seems that the impact on other essential services and businesses in the area does not seem to have been fully considered, as others have mentioned already this evening. So for these reasons, I just want to urge the council to reconsider the proposal and explore alternative options and close of the car park. Based on things I've heard this evening, if there's any option of some sort of season ticket for the multi-storey to allow full-time workers to use it at not such a high cost of you paying £6.50 a day, that would be something that I would like to see considered. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and apologies for missing you initially. Any points of clarification from committee members? No, in that case, we move on to invite non-committee members who want to speak on this issue. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. My name's Councillor Ian Johnson. I'm a Plaid Cymru councillor representing Barry Town Centre, which includes the Court Road multi-storey car park. We had a bit of a history lesson earlier from the leader. Well, I've been a councillor since 2012. This is the third time in a decade I've been forced to come to this committee to defend my local area from council proposals, whether they be Labour or the Conservatives in charge. I'm only half joking or playing devil's advocate when I ask why the council is determined to wreck the county's main shopping street, whether that's the car park proposal tonight or setting up a town centre cafe in competition with 6 private sector coffee shops that already pay staff rates and rents. From across the Vale tonight, we've heard from business owners about the impact upon them. Holton Road is no different. I put it to you that the level of jeopardy from these changes goes in one direction and one direction only. If the council gets it wrong, there's a mea culpa several years down the line. However, a business owner affected by the council's decision faces a loss of income, employment and another closed shop on our high streets. Considering some of the conversations earlier, it's also an ironic aside that the goods sheds, when planning permission was given for that in 2019, included a car park, which now provides the opposition to the car parking that other places, existing businesses, would be using. The process, Chair, has been poor on this. I have no recollection of consultation with local councillors, and the first I heard it was when I saw these Cabinet papers published at the start of January. They recommended going to Cabinet on the Thursday and to the committee on the following Tuesday. An attempt to railroad this through without public comment and without proper scrutiny. I'm very glad that this committee and the Chair pushed this back a fortnight to allow people to have this conversation properly. Turning to the Court Road car park, the evidence base is poor and not for the first time. I remember in 2019 that plans for car park charging at Kendrick Road and Thompson Street were thrown out when we realised the cost of the charging machines was more than the amount of money that would be made over 7 years. The usage survey published here at Appendix D is embarrassing. Who thought that surveying car park usage before 9 a.m. would be the ideal time, especially when, for example, the Wyndham Street car park has a big sign outside which says it opens at 9:30? Why survey before it is supposed to be opening or immediately afterwards? I visited the Court Road multi-storey car park at 10 a.m. last Friday. There were just under 100 cars present there and 50 at Wyndham Street. Whatever officers say, there's clearly not enough space to accommodate those cars at Court Road into other town centre car parks or around local areas where they've been in competition with local residents for premium car parking spaces already, as we've heard from Claire Cook and from Louise Slimmings already. There's been no consultation exercise, it's unclear what conversations have taken place. In 2019, we were told that Colton Road primary school teachers are regular users of the Court Road car park, and they are the only school with no on-site car parking facility within the area. I don't know whether that's true, but is the council really expecting teachers to walk for up to a mile in the rain with their teaching resources after parking elsewhere? What conversation has been held with the Education Department about this, or teaching trade unions for that matter? What conversations has the council had with their own economy department or with Halton Road traders about the impact upon them? Chair, a few months ago in full council, we all discussed the £20 million for town centre regeneration, a decade-long investment in Barry. Is it really our big idea as a council to close the main town centre car park and generally make everybody's life more awkward? Surely a capital bid for some of that £20 million would be considered beneficial in supporting our town centre and the same for tackling any antisocial behaviour at the site. What would be the effects on non-domestic rates by reducing the allocated space for car parking? How would that affect the rateable value? We see in the report that some of the maintenance challenges are related to the upper levels on 6 and 7, those which are the areas least used. I don't know. There's been no consultation with me. I ask committee to refer this back to Cabinet tonight with a recommendation for a new, properly worked through report that answers all of the challenges raised tonight and has the professionalism that I know our officers are capable of, rather than one which feels slapdash and only half-baked. Perhaps then we might reach an agreement as to the best way forward. Diolch yn fawr pawb.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Officers, are there any specific issues within those comments that you want to pick up at this stage? Obviously, there are concerns around the time period for the surveys. I should say that as the Town Centre Councillor, I share those concerns. Any response that you're able to make at this stage to that?
Chair, I need to say that we have, it's mentioned in Colin's presentation, we've looked at the possibility of whether this would stack up under the charging regime similar to Wyndham Street, and it's a long way away. And I take Councillor Johnson's comments on board. This was a snapshot survey. We have other data. We have security staff, even though that the lady who spoke said she doesn't see them, but they should be there, and we will check that when we go back. But they've done surveys in the past and showed reasonably low numbers. In a week, 100 or so parking, which I think that's what was said. Sometimes a handful of cars on a Saturday. So it's very difficult to consider what other options are available for this car park when you consider how much it costs to operate and how much it would cost in terms of charging to recover its costs and at least get close to break even. But all I can say, Chair, is all the comments that's been made, I've noted them.
Thank you. Councillor Rhys-Thomas, you've indicated that you want to speak on this issue. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Not this specific one, but I'm calling back to the Penarth Esplanade and Cliff Walk, if I may. And I just want to start by saying it's been really useful to hear all the contributors here tonight, particularly from the traders, including Matt. So thank you for your contribution. It's really useful. So focusing back on Penarth and the Esplanade and Cliff Walk, which are in my ward of Plymouth, to my mind, it's the jewel in the crown of the Vale of Glamorgan. I mean, Barry Island's wonderful, but I think the Esplanade's even better, if I may say so. I know there's some disagreement here tonight, and we'll talk about that after. But there's a wonderful range of people who enjoy the Esplanade. There are families with small children. You see prams rolling down the seafront. young people with disabilities who make group trips to enjoy the stunning views, and then the community-minded groups like the Dawn Stalkers who take a dip in the chilly waters and bring people together, which is really wonderful. I could go on, and I'm sure people don't want me to, but my point is that the seafront in Penarth is a hub for the community. It's a brilliant thing that people want to come to Penarth and other areas across the Vale of Glamorgan, spending time and money in our wonderful part of the world. We should be encouraging people to come to our areas and not discouraging them by imposing unnecessary parking charges. Part of the attraction for people is the array of cafes and restaurants. These hospitality businesses are the backbone of the Esplanade and our high streets and society more generally across the Vale and beyond. They provide services and create jobs, meaning local people can have decent incomes in our areas. Local councils should be doing all they can to support these businesses to help them grow and prosper. With these punitive proposed parking charges, it's clear the Vale Council is determined to do the opposite by putting up barriers to entry, and this will cost jobs, as we heard tonight. Times are tough for businesses at the moment, particularly in Wales. The Welsh Government has worked to create a hostile environment for business, which includes imposing the highest business rate in Great Britain, with the multiplier set to further increase for businesses of all sizes in April. Not only that, but the British Labour government has hiked employer national insurance contributions, which will make life much more difficult for small and medium enterprises. At a time like this, the Vale Council could play an important role in shielding local businesses from the anti-business attitudes emanating from Cardiff Bay and Westminster. Instead, we have these parking charge proposals, which the Cabinet member says are in response to businesses on the Esplanade doing really well. If anyone from the Vale Council has bothered to speak to traders when dreaming up this plan, then they have found out that businesses aren't doing really well. Despite the hard work and entrepreneurial spirit of the people that run these businesses, the landscape is gloomy, and these proposals make it gloomier still. Now, the reason that the Vale Council didn't engage in a consultation, if we're honest, is that they knew what the response would be. Not only are business owners and employees dead against these proposals, but petitions have been signed by thousands of Penarthians who know that the Labour Cabinet here are making a big mistake, and not for the first time. It isn't too late for the council. Ditch these proposed parking charges and help make Penarth Esplanade the best that it possibly can be. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Councillor. Unless I've misunderstood anything you said, I think most of those points have been addressed already by officers. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to come back again to the issue that we're focusing on at the moment, which is Court Road closure. Any other non-committee members that want to speak on this issue? Yes, Councillor Collins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit, I was upset to see these Cabinet papers without being consulted as one of the town centre councillors. This is going to have what I believe to be a detrimental effect on the town centre. Up and down the country, high streets are struggling, they are falling into decline, and the Cabinet want to drive what could be the final nail in the coffin in Barry Town. This is going to cause problems. People are not going to want to come shopping if they have to compete for parking. The costs are going to be too high. Residents are going to suffer. If Court Road car park is closed, people need to find alternative car parking. They're saying, oh, use Halton Road, but a lot of the side streets around Halton Road are restricted to residence permits. Only a few aren't. Look at Castleland Street, Station Street, St Mary's Avenue, Kingsland Crescent. Parts of Station, Castleland and St Mary's are restricted to permits with a 2-hour wait, but that's only the bit between Cross Street and Halton the Road. The rest of the streets are not restricted, which means anyone can use them. Now, going back to when these were built, they weren't built with the design of cars in mind. They weren't built to take the level of traffic we have now, let alone any additional cars that will be using the spaces. Already there are arguments between drivers going 2 ways on narrow streets with no passing spaces. If you are going to consider this, at least consider making those streets one way. It is something that residents in those 4 streets have been asking for years and keep getting turned down. You are not looking at this correctly. Cabinet should withdraw this report, take it out to consultation and listen to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell Godfrey, please. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, hang on. Yeah, the point I want to make is that I've got a large amount of experience dealing with the retail sector. And for an area of retail shops to thrive, you need feet on the ground. You need people there that are going to shop in the shops. Now, we discussed this recently at a full council meeting where there was concerns expressed about shops closing on Holton Road. And if I can suggest, possibly a delegation needs to go to Cwmbran to see how successful they are. And why is it successful and always busy? Because they've got free parking. So if Torvain can provide free parking in their town centre, why can't we do that in Barry? There's only one way that the High Street, the Holton Road, is going to come back and thrive, and that is with free parking. The council already, I'm led to believe, put the prices up at the street market that was in Holton Road. And that resulted in us losing the street market, which is bringing people to the town. So if we're going to take away Court Road car park and start charging, it's going to have a detrimental effect even more on Holton Road, and I think it could be the death nail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other non-committee members who want to comment on this issue? Otherwise, I'm going to Councillor Hodges, and then I'm going to bring us on to the. Then I'm going to bring us on to the formal debate with committee members.
Just briefly, and as a Barry councillor, I think one point that hasn't been brought up is about Court Road multi-storey car park is the appalling lack of maintenance over the years. It's not been exactly attractive, but it is well used. I think one of the main concerns and one of the main cynicisms that are coming out is that, and I'm sure that it'll be told, oh, it's early days, is no one's talking yet about the future use of this site if it is closed. And theories will abound, and I think there needs to be some honesty into what the future use of that site, if this vital car park is shut, is going to be used for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the report does briefly comment on future use, but can I ask officers to clarify what the process would be?
So, Chair, there is no anticipated alternative use at the moment if this car park closes. So this would be subject to some sort of study and subject to a further report back to Cabinet with a proposal for that future use. But at the moment, there's nothing particularly planned at all.
Thank you. Moving on to committee members. Councillor Iannucci Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few points, so I'll start, but if you would like me to stop so that we can do some answers in the middle, then that's fine. So starting with the report, it says, so for item 2.49, there might be lots of unrestricted street parking nearby, but when you did the survey, did anyone check whether or not there was room to accommodate all of the people who wouldn't be in Court Road if Court Road didn't exist? So that's my first one. The second one then is for 2.52, it says that residents said that they would not pay to park there. Obviously, I don't know what the question was at the time, but were they given, like, we need to talk to people like grown-ups. If we tell them that the option is we might need to charge for this or you're going to have to lose it, I think residents might have said, and obviously we don't know that for sure, but if we haven't asked, would you rather pay or not have the option of parking there at all, I think we'd get a different answer. Going on to Appendix D, so the actual times of the surveys, absolutely fair dues to everyone who's got up to go shopping at 9:30 on a Saturday. That's a very small part of the shopping day, and I'm not convinced that this data that we've been given this evening gives me any clear idea of how people are using the car park. So I would suggest that something that needs to be done before we can possibly make a decision is that we need a proper survey done on this over a period of several months, possibly only even 3 or something like that. But I do not think this gives us a clear indication of how well this car park is being used before we can make such a big decision. Another point is, happy to accept that the car park is in decline. We've owned it the whole time. Why have we let it get as bad as it is now? It would have been cheaper to repair it as it went along instead of now facing a huge bill, and I think that is on us. And then my final point is that if we would like to encourage people to cycle to Holton Road, are we going to do anything to increase the provision of places to leave bikes safely so that people can actually bring their bikes to town? Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Officers, can you pick those points up? Who's going to go? Miles.
Start, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the survey of available unrestricted parking bays around the area within 0.8 of a mile, this was a desktop survey. So this is about looking at the traffic regulation orders, and I think the report refers to that. In terms of charging, yeah, the question was asked in 2018. What essentially we're saying is the charging regime for the numbers that we know are there would have to be higher than the current charging regime that we have for town centres. And that's a concern because we got this principle of not charging for the first 2 hours. So it would not realise the sort of income that this car park costs to run and its capital commitment. In terms of its maintenance, we have many financial commitments in our area. I'm sure members appreciate that. We're struggling to maintain the highway network as best we can. Ideally, if we had more money, every asset we had would be in tip-top shape. But we just have to prioritise. We're not saying that the car park needs urgent closure because it's unsafe. We're just saying it needs work. It does have surveys. It does have maintenance. But with all the other commitments we've got, including things like community centres and highway infrastructure, street lighting and whatever, it's difficult to ensure that everything is maintained at tip-top level. I wish I was able to do that. But it's just that we don't have enough money to ensure that. And in terms of cycling, we do have cycle stands in Holton Road itself. They're quite ornate. They were put in fairly recently. So there is a provision for cycles to be locked up. Whether that's sufficient, I'm prepared to relook at that, but there is a current provision in place as it stands.
Thank you very much. Any other committee members who want to address this issue? Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think if we consider the impact, certainly for visitors to Holton Road, I'm going back a couple of decades ago when I used to work in Barry, and it was a vibrant place. We had Dan Evans, we had lots of shops, and people used to come here. If you are not a local, then the first thing you would do if you were to come here, and if we look at the future, and our ambition is to redevelop Holton Road, you would look for a multi-storey car park to park in until we're at a position where our public transport is able to support people with regular, frequent and cheap transport to our towns. We will just have to stick with what we've got. And we have a multi-storey car park. We've done a survey, and I trust that that survey was done with good intent, but it's clear from the representation here today, from all of the people who've written in and said, I've done my own survey. It's you know, there's hundreds of cars in this car park. We need to revisit that survey. We need to do it over an extended period of time, from when it opens until when it closes, and over 7 days a week. If we genuinely believe that it is not used enough, and therefore we have to close it. I would like to keep it as it is for now. I'd like us to survey it. I'd like us to keep our ambition on the future, and that is that the Holton Road will become vibrant again. People will come to shop there. We will try and turn that trend, which at the moment and over the last decade has been clicks, not bricks, out of shopping supermarket experiences, which has been the death knell of our high streets. That's not That's not the council's fault. That's just the way things have gone. So we need to redevelop that high street. We need to still have the facilities for visitors to come so that they can park, for locals to park so that it isn't in front of people's houses. And I think we just need to keep that vision for us. And possibly when we look at that car park, could we be innovative? Could we think about, as other car parks do, a floor which could be used for valeting and car washing, for some other ways of income generating rather than just for people to park? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And again, as the relevant ward member, I have to say I agree with all of those comments. I've already made it clear I am concerned that the survey work that's been done isn't sufficient to identify use. Neither does it take into account the availability of parking spaces on the residential streets, the impact that will have on local residents, or as we've heard from members of the public, the impact that will have on traders. So all I can do is say that I agree with those comments. Councillor Hooper, and then I think that is it from committee members. I will see if the cabinet member or leader want to comment, and we'll move on to the final bit of the report before I attempt to summarise at the end. Councillor Hooper.
I'll be very brief, and I think this talks to taking Councillor Prothero's points about retail. I think what we've heard today, this isn't just about retail. What we've heard is the number of people who are using it to access services, whether it's people who are accessing the NHS dental services or some people are parking because it's the only car park they can use for the school. So I think this is a very narrow issue in this particular thing. That still, even taking that point, it still needs to stay there. But I think this talks the way we've taken the finances of this. It's all in isolation. So it's, can this car park support the costs of this car park? And actually what we're seeing is this is a wider issue. And this is about the council being able to say, actually, this may be something that we have to fund from other resources. We can't just always equate one thing to the other. We know this. And I think that that's a fool's errand if we start doing it, because in essence, there'll be a load of things that we say, well, it doesn't pay for it, so we need to stop it. It's nonsense. We're not a business. I've heard too often tonight that we've been referenced as a business. A council is not a business. A business is in competition for resources, and people could choose where to go for things. That isn't what this council is. We're a public body providing a public service. So if we can get that narrative out here in the first place, it may stop decisions like this even being brought. This is flawed in so many ways. This needs to be kicked out. Now, I can't believe that this has even been tabled for this committee. It's that flawed, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, and I can see that the cabinet member wants to respond. Sorry, forgive me, Councillor William. I'll bring Councillor William in first, and I'll come to you, Councillor Wilson.
Oh, forgive me, Chair. Just a point of clarification: you will be bringing us in for the final debate after, or is it now that you want us to speak?
It's now.
And then I seek permission to be allowed to speak at some point. Thank you.
You're able to speak now.
Very kind, thank you. I've listened to all the submissions made this evening, and I chose to speak right at the end, rather than keep on inserting myself throughout. Twice before, in this very scrutiny committee, albeit under different names in the last decade, we've kicked this proposal into touch, last time being in 2019. So imagine my surprise when it reared its ugly head all over again. Now, I want to speak because of two reasons. Yes, to express my dissatisfaction with the proposals, but also with the actual process itself. The proposals are ill-conceived, rushed through, and I think counterproductive. But the process has already been mentioned. There was no consultation with members of the public or the council, council members, that is, and they were sprung upon us. And this is the great thing, the timing. It was a day after the deadline had lapsed for members of the public to be able to register their desire to speak on the item of the Scrutiny Committee of the 14th of January. And with little time available, Councillor Hooper and I successfully demanded that the item be deferred so that people could make their voices heard today and express their numerous concerns with the proposals. And that's the only reason that they have been allowed to speak today. I'm at a loss as to why this item was so hurriedly placed on the agenda, but by yourself as chairperson. This was a very bad move, which has done nothing other than to cause members of the public to lose trust and further confidence in the council. It's done nothing to reassure them that they are being listened to. At best, it's seen as sloppy and incompetent, but at worst, it's seen as a calculated and sneaky attempt designed to avoid scrutiny and prevent any discontent from being voiced, so that the Labour-controlled Scrutiny Committee can help the Labour colleagues in Cabinet to steamroll the proposal through with the minimum of resistance. Now, whatever the truth behind the process and its democratic deficit, I'll move on to the proposals themselves. They were thrown out twice before, for the same good reasons that are still valid today, and I don't know why councillors who voted against these proposals less than 5 years ago have suddenly changed their minds now that they're in power. It makes no sense to destroy the vulnerable economy and businesses of Barry Town Centre by reducing the number of parking spaces available to potential shoppers that we're trying to attract and charge them for the ones that are. Now, as well as the displacement chaos caused by closing Court Road car park to local residents, these proposals are messing about with businesses and therefore the livelihoods of all those people involved with them. Business owners and employees I've spoken to are terrified. This, what I think of as an irresponsible proposal to close Court Road car park, is playing havoc and threatening real people's lives, causing them great anxiety. Now, this applies equally to businesses on the island and also those near the Bronamore car park in the Nap, who rely on trade specifically from local residents, especially in the winter months. They're damaging. They don't show any desire to help residents or local businesses. They just punish local residents who are not fortunate enough to live near our beaches. Councillor Hooper pointed out that the displacement dangers that are already bad over the White Houses near the Old Harbour, these proposals will only make a bad problem a heck of a lot worse. This is a facility that we should be providing our residents, saving them a fortune in car parking charges as of right. There's a cost of living crisis on. We are not a business. We are a corporate parent. We should be encouraging them to attend here for their mental well-being, as has been alluded to earlier. We should also be doing this in order to encourage much-needed spend by visitors to benefit our local businesses, as I said, especially during the winter months. I'm grateful to the Chair for the clarification regarding the resurfacing of Bronamore car park. This is something that frankly should have been done 2 decades ago when I and Councillor Hodges called for it, and I would not want it to be used as a way of blackmailing us into voting for these proposals. But with regards to 2.3 in the report, it claims that there is an anomaly on the island that needs to be ironed out. A period of 2 hours was suggested a heck of a long time ago. Then the argument was that it would ensure turnover of visitors to the island whilst enabling people to walk their dogs and enjoy time at one of the many cafes. The 1 hour proposal would only do nothing to help the economy, since people would just walk their dogs and then go home before spending any money at all. Now, tourists and people who wish to spend more time on the island can pay to use the 2 large car parks that currently serve the area. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. Now, regarding congestion, amending parking arrangements doesn't solve congestion. Only solving the bottleneck itself would do that. And as someone who used to drive for a well-known grocers, I can concur with Councillor Millie Collins behind me. She's absolutely right when she referred to the difficulty of passing cars on the side streets off Dockview Road. These proposals will only exacerbate that problem. And the proposals for the island, they charge people during the daytime. It's all very well saying that it's free until 10, but during the daytime, it's people who are either not in work or who are retired and on a pension, the people least able to afford them. And it'll discourage spending during those daytime hours on our local businesses who are already finding it difficult enough to make a living as it is. The idea of a season ticket is an interesting one, especially when you say it's £2 a week. That's not a bad idea in principle. The problem is that in practical terms, perception is everything. And we've heard today that many people would perceive that it's something they can't afford to buy. And I'm afraid talking about low-cost loans with credit unions is a flight of fantasy. This would only result in less footfall for our businesses and an amenity our residents will no longer be able to enjoy freely. And we've seen already, Mr. Holland mentioned Cosmiston. We've seen what happens when this is normalised. went down 30%, and now it's normalised at about 20%. 20% less trade than before. We can't punish our businesses again and again. And I don't think we as an authority should be gambling our local businesses' livelihoods with this scheme. So, in conclusion, I would remind committee members that we are here to scrutinise and not do the bidding of your cabinet colleagues. The economic arguments put forward by the cabinet member regarding staff of businesses parking on the island, frankly, seem to have been concocted out of thin air. It's fag packet economics. For all the reasons voiced earlier so eloquently by Laura, Louis, Jonathan, Claire, as well as by the local ward members, Millie Collins, Councillor Hodges and Ian Johnson and Councillor Ernest, it's obvious these proposals are just unworkable, and they hold little merit for residents, businesses and even the council's own coffers. So I'm going to move that we refer this back to Cabinet with a recommendation to withdraw the paper and scrap these proposals.
I second that.
Thank you. Can I just remind councillors, we do have a final bit of this report that we have to consider before we conclude. There are still a few other recommendations within the referral from Cabinet that we have to consider. So can I just check if any other committee members want to speak on the issue of Court Road closure, which is what we're focusing on now, before I move us to the last bit of the report and draw the meeting to an end?
Chairman,
Councillor Ernest, do you want to come in? Councillor Ernest, nobody can hear you unless you press your button. Thank you.
Chairman, you're confusing us because you said a few moments ago that would be it. Yeah. When Councillor Willam queried it. Now you're telling me you're going to take another part of the report and then we can come in debate. Can I be absolutely sure? Because I have plenty to say, but I'm not going to be left out with respect because
I'm very happy to clarify, Councillor Ernest. I hope I've made it clear throughout the scrutiny report that the debate has been happening with committee members at every stage of tonight's meeting. The report is before you with all the recommendations. I would assume that all councillors have read it and understand that there are other recommendations.
After nearly 3 hours, Chairman,
Please do not interrupt me, Councillor. I am still speaking. I would hope it would be clear to all councillors that we still have some other issues to consider. I'm going to move us on. Are there any final points on the Court Road closure? Otherwise, we will take the final part of the report, and let me assure you it is very brief.
Thank you, Chairman.
Colin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And you're right, this is very brief. There is only one slide left to conclude the slides and report. And this is in relation to residential parking permits. So the Vale Glamorgan is one of very few authorities not to levy a charge for permits. There are, in our existing schemes, 4,429 properties eligible, 2,123 permits are issued, as well as 996 visitor permits. And the report recommends that this remains free of charge and that a charge is not applied to the residential parking schemes, mainly because there'll be a massive impact on local residents who are mainly in terraced housing areas. And then we would move to a digitalised system of issuing permits during this year to reduce some small administration costs in the back office. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Colin. Any comments or questions from non-committee members in relation to those proposals? No, then we move to committee members. Councillor Hooper.
It's great to have a part of this report that can be welcomed. I'm sure everyone's really pleased about that. Thank you very much.
That's it. Thank you. Anything from anyone else? Right, okay. We have then considered all the proposals within the report. I just want to check with committee members whether or not there are any final comments or questions which have not already been addressed during the debate that we've had this evening. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. There's 4 points I want to make. The first relates to the fact that this report, we're having on the hoof changes being brought to us as a committee, which isn't appropriate. We've had a commitment which isn't in the report to resurface of Bronamore and Clifftop. I'm sure we're all pleased about it, but it wasn't a commitment in the report. And it seems as though what we've got is officers and cabinet members just going, well, I can see we're losing this argument, so I'll throw these benefits in at the same thing. We've had a universal pass being mentioned. We're talking about car parking and car park. That should have been part of the report. It's not part of the report, and I think it indicates where this report is poor. We talked about other opportunities to pay. Clearly, that's something that needs to be. Councillor William has already said about people, £100 for a car parking, a standard car parking charge for a year is a lot of money for people to spend. If they could do it more easily and spread it, then that might be something that's appropriate. It should be in the report. We've had the credit union opportunity. If that's something that's serious, it should have been in the report. You can't just deliver changes on the hoof when you see you're losing an argument. The second thing I want to talk about is engagement. I think engagement, it's clear engagement on this issue it's not even been poor, it's been non-existent. We've not talked to people like we should have done. And we've heard first-hand testimony from people who've taken the time and effort to come here and talk to us that indicates the problems that we're related to. That all could have been drawn out had there been proper engagement. And yet we're getting in a place now where people are frankly angry and peeved by having to come here and do this. This should have been dealt with much more appropriately. The third point I want to make is related to, we've talked about process, is what's happened here. So the leader often references the fact that scrutiny is the place where we should be dealing with some of these issues. I do not understand how this became an urgent issue. And frankly, Chair, I'd like to know how you decided this would be an urgent issue for us to deal with. You subsequently withdrew that, and we've got this debate tonight. But the impact of it being an urgent issue meant that the people here tonight weren't able to put their cases, which has been a huge benefit to this committee. Yeah. It actually meant that we aren't be able to have this sort of debate that we've had, which I think is inappropriate. And it's as Councillor Williams said, this is it's a deficit to our democracy. And it goes against everything that this council says but isn't doing. So I really like to understand why that's the case and how that's happened. And is it, and I really hope it isn't, just Labour Council scrutiny chairs doing what Labour Council colleagues have told them to do, Cabinet colleagues have told them to do. And the last thing, and this is a broader issue, and Councillor Rhys-Thomas mentioned this earlier and talked about the wider issues to this. We've heard, and the phrase that's stuck in my mind, we're in an ever-shrinking budget world. Well, I tell you what you've got is a UK Labour Westminster government who sets the budget. Yeah. You've got a Labour Senedd that gives the budgets back to this council, and you've got a Labour council here. So there is nowhere to hide. This is a point where you need to start saying, if we do not have enough money, and as Miles said, I haven't got enough money to do the things I need to do. If we're just going to manage the decline of our public realm, we should be ashamed of ourselves and start acting like we actually care about this place rather than just accepting it, because this is just a recipe for disaster. And the thing that should scare us most electorally, it's a recipe for the likes of the agitators who are in our communities saying that the problem with all this isn't these budgets, it's the people who are taking over, coming in small boats and things like this. That sort of stuff this leads into. Unless you solve it and deliver these things properly, that's the danger.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Charles Champion, please.
There seems to be an issue with the car. We could talk about the M4 Relief Road. We could talk about the road that was going to go to the airport. And Miles has said they want to get people out of cars and into buses and on bikes. But as Councillor Petherose said, the Royal Vale, and even probably Barry, that people need to get into their car to get from A to B. And a lot of these proposals tonight are just hitting car users. And I don't know why it's come so early. Is it something to do with that end of year in March? It just seems a very poor proposal to bring towards this committee, and I echo every committee member.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first point I'm going to say is, why are these charges being introduced? There are far better ways of financing the services. We recognise that the department is short. There are other ways in which this council spends money where savings can be achieved to find the sort of monies that Miles need for this. My colleague, Councillor Rees, has admirably expanded some of the issues around the Esplanade. But I ask, Chairman, what purpose will be served by the introduction of parking regulations? What is the net gain after all the controls, the equipment, the lining, the poles, the plates, the cost of the regulations have been paid for? But what losses will come about, Chairman? Tourism, business income, visits by the disabled, those with serious illness, pensioners who enjoy a few moments by the seaside, the loss of money for the council-owned but highly unprofitable Pier Pavilion and the Pier Cafe. Young people come to the Esplanade to learn to row, to sail, to swim, and this brings great enjoyment. They don't have lots of money. They have limited means. Many of them are supported by their parents. Where will the drivers go, Chairman, to avoid parking? The surrounding roads in Penarth, such as Bridgeman Road, Marine Parade, Park Road, Holmesdale Place, Plymouth Road, all very busy roads at the moment, will be even busier if these regulations are brought about. And we've talked tonight about public transport, a very poor service, even in the town of Penarth serving the Esplanade. It runs infrequently. It's mostly empty, I have to accept. It ends at around about 6 o'clock in the evening, and the best of my knowledge doesn't operate at weekends. So if you want to go on a Sunday, tough, you've got to walk. How do the public and the staff working in their businesses actually get home when they finish work? Maybe it's late in the evening, in which case the parking would be free, but they've had to come to work maybe at 8 or 9 in the morning. What of so-called active travel, Chairman? We're always being asked by Welsh Government to have active travel, but on the Esplanade, you've got steep hills on all 3 sides of the Esplanade. 1, 2, 3. Nobody but the fittest in our society can tackle such climbs. This rules out the elderly, those with young children, and those who are not fit enough. And as for cycling, Chairman, well, forget it unless you're a very keen cycling fanatic in Lycra. No environmental impact assessment being carried out. That's been mentioned by all colleagues tonight. But why? How can such a major policy decision be introduced in the Esplanade area without considering the impact on the local climate, noise pollution, congestion, and footfall? No heritage impact statement. We haven't talked about that tonight, but I'll just mention it. Despite this being one of the best preserved conservation areas in a seaside resort, our officers have completely failed to undertake any assessments on the introduction of a mass of ugly street furniture, signage, road markings, upheaval to the pen and stone pavements, tar macadam surfaces, the existing period lighting columns and footpaths, all of which the council tells us it can ill afford to maintain. And the pier, Penarth Pier, owned by this council, an absolute gem in Wales, one of the finest in the UK. Visitor numbers are bound to fall. Passengers on the motor vessel Waverley, assuming that they deign to come back to the Vale of Glamorgan this year, perhaps not if they hear about these charges, but passengers will be unable to park or board ship for any of the cruises. They will if they can get a bus there, but if they've got to stay in any of in our sole car park, the Clifftop car park, that's going to cost them an arm and a leg, because most of these cruises run for 4, 5, 6 hours or even daytime long. And where would those 750 plus passengers park if they do wish to sail out of Penarth? A massive blow to the economy of our delightful town and a loss to the council and the tenants of our shops. And the Clifftop car park, which we've talked about a lot tonight, but I'll have my word if I may, promoted by the Vale as the answer to all Penarth's parking issues. It will now be almost as expensive to park as on the Esplanade. It will deter young families from enjoying one of the best and well-sited play areas in the Vale and take away business from yet another of the council leased buildings, posing a threat to those businesses and stopping access to one of the very few public toilets left in Penarth. And we haven't talked about those tonight. It'll cost you to park to go to the loo. This is the only car park in Penarth, Chairman. There are no others. And as Councillor Wilson mentioned earlier, well, it's only £100 a year. But if you're on a low wage economy, £100 is a lot of money, maybe your food for a couple of weeks. Chairman, these proposals bring huge discredit on the Labour administration in the Vale of Glamorgan, and particularly those cabinet members who support the scheme. There's been not a word in response by them to the scores of queries and objections raised, not only by my constituents, but also those living further away from Penarth, all of whom would be seriously affected by this drastic and unwelcome scheme. And while some local members have been overwhelmed by the opposition to imposing such expensive charges at a time when the public are being hammered by higher taxation on a national scale. Chairman, my colleague here has already called for a vote, and I've seconded that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come to recommendations at the end. I haven't summed up yet. Final comment, Councillor, because then I am going to give the Cabinet member and the leader the opportunity to respond, and then I am going to sum up so everybody is clear.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I'd like to call for a recorded vote when my proposal, seconded by Councillor Ernest, is made. Thank you, Councillor Ernest.
Thank you. Cabinet member, Councillor Wilson, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting debate. Obviously, there's lots of comments made on the different aspects of the Cabinet report. But clearly, there's a few issues I'd like to point out. Consultation. Now, some people have said, I think it was Councillor Collins, referred to that she hadn't been consulted yet, about a particular closure of Court Road car park. The fact is, this report is wide-ranging. It includes almost every ward within the Vale, either directly or indirectly. And that's why we didn't have ward-by-ward consultation on this. If it was a particular location, just one location, then perhaps that might happen. The second point is about congestion. When I've been around Barry Island, even the Esplanade, people have issues with congestion. And really what I'm trying to encourage is something called churn. Churn is people being there for a couple of hours, then moving out. Now, a good example, which Councillor Ernest will know fully well, is Herbert Terrace. Herbert Terrace is a street in Penarth, largely dominated by the small Tesco's. It's known as small Tesco's. And people pop in and pop out, and you have churn. And that's the sort of thing, to a certain extent, we would like in the Esplanade. We don't want people there spending hours and hours at the Esplanade. We want a rotation of people. And that would put less pressure on parking in places like Marine Parade and other roads, which Councillor Ernest talks about. The other point is finance. Yes, finance is a big issue. My director rightly said that, several years ago, my budget was 15%. Now it's 8%. We have it tough in neighbourhood services. We really do. But equally, if we don't do it in my area, where else do we do it? Do we do it in education? Because enough of you have said to me, education, we've got real issues there. Do we do it in social services? We've got issues of an ageing population. We've got a budget now, education and social services equal roughly 71% of the budget now. My area, if you include highways, road servicing, waste and recycling, is around about 8%. You know, the financial imperative, you know, I am trying to generate some revenue in order to save the council some money and protect the vulnerable. That's what I'm trying to do. Now, I know you've had discussion about the £100. Yes, it does seem a lot of money as a lump sum. Of course it does. But I know that if we can look to schemes, like maybe a credit union or another provider, perhaps we can then break it down to a more manageable amount of money. And yes, I am concerned about staff parking in premier places. If staff can park away from the shops and in car parks, surely that's a benefit for everybody, including the staff that work there, because it means that they're more likely to be employed. And I think that's really an issue that I like to bring out as well. Yes, I will be listening to what you've all been saying here. And it is vital that as a cabinet member, I am listening. You know, and it's good that we have a healthy debate here. I haven't had anyone talk when I'm talking, which I really appreciate. I think some statements have been overstated, but, you know, I know the usual suspects that do that. And on the whole, people have behaved themselves, and I really appreciate that. I also like to emphasise that in the evening, parking is free in these locations as well. And really, you know, this will not affect one way or another the nighttime economy. And I think that is also an important thing to emphasise. And also it won't affect people like the dawn stalkers either, because in the morning, you know, their parking is free as well if we talk about Penarth. But thank you all for listening to me. And I really thank you all for your contributions, including members of the public as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader, did you want to come in at this point?
Yes, if I can get to work. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. Just a couple of comments and a couple of clarifications. Some people have said that they didn't receive responses to letters. Everybody did. But on the whole, if I respond to people personally, I said I will be at scrutiny. I will answer what I can at that, and I will fill in anything else subsequently. The difficulty was that there was a lot of inaccurate information, that, you know, the actual basis of a number of emails was paying £10 to park and it being all day and this sort of thing. And it was really difficult to have a constructive conversation there. So it was important it came to here, and I thank everyone for their input into this. Talking about all this amazing loads of money that we've got 6 months into a new UK administration, I'm sorry, it's not there yet. We are in a situation, last time I counted, I thought, Councillor Wilson, you were saying how well-behaved people were.
Councillors, can I ask that you just show respect when another councillor is speaking? You are not spoken over when you address committee. Can I just ask that we treat one another with respect and allow the leader to finish her response without comment? Thank you.
So there are a number of things that we will consider and that we have to consider going forward. And also I would welcome the further input of this committee, because one is, if you look at our corporate plan and our budget, it talks about the different ways in which we will be able to deliver a balanced budget and to deliver services. And there's a whole range of things there. One of those things is to do with fees and charges. One of those things is partnership working, various other things, transformation agenda. As Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, I do not have the luxury of running an overdraft. This council, by law, has to deliver a balanced budget. And these proposals form part of that. If I can manage it within the timescales, I would propose to hold this reference, the reference that comes from this scrutiny, to be considered alongside the reference that comes from this scrutiny committee when you debate the budget report next month, because I think that all plays into it. And I would say there's talk about this is, this is not a social business. This organisation these days, all local authorities really are social businesses, because we have some aspects of earned income, we have some aspects of grants, we have some aspects of other funds that we have, and we employ all those levels. Now, when we're talking about what we do, we have to consider all those and where that fits. So if we can look at that. And the only other thing that I would say is I'm usually on the bus going into the Civic. Normally have some of my best chats with people on the bus. And also when I'm cycling, I don't wear Lycra. So, people of all ages don't have to go by car. I can see Councillor Hennessy laughing, because we normally meet each other in Hilton Road at about 7:45 in the morning. So those things all come into it, and there are more conversations to have around these, and I would welcome further conversation. At the moment, this is part of a balanced budget. If it isn't, we need to find out how that then works.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you, everybody, for all the contributions this evening and what I think has been a very, very helpful debate on the issues. I'm going to try, I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said tonight, because we'll be here for another 2.5 hours, but I am going to capture some of the key issues that have been raised, so that we don't lose them in terms of recommendation for consideration at the end of our committee. So they include the need for equality impact assessment. No, I shall start to say committee welcomes the proposals around residential parking permits, and therefore there appear to be no recommendations or feedback to Cabinet in relation to that aspect of the report that's before us this evening. Then I move on. There is clearly a wish for equality impact assessments in relation to each of the proposals, because the view of committee is that there hasn't been sufficient consideration in terms of the introduction of on-street parking, off-street car park charges, or the future of Court Road car park in relation to the impact on traders, nearby residents living around the area, and members of the public, and more work is required to identify that. In terms of on-street parking, there is a suggestion that consideration should be given to the implementation of any on-street car parking charges, including a period for free car parking of 1 or 2 hours and or seasonal parking. If on-street parking charges are introduced, then there should be a review period built into that, so appropriate changes can be made as required. And I think also there is a requirement to clarify, confirm the legal position in relation to the use of any money that might be raised through the introduction of car parking charges, so we fully understand what that money can be spent on. Specifically in relation to off-street charges, committee's view is that work should be done to improve the car park services at Bronnermoor and Clifftop car parks prior to the introduction of charging, that appropriate enforcement capacity will be required to achieve the objectives of introducing charging both in on-street and off-street areas. That consideration should be given to what approaches can be made to ensure affordability in relation to parking permits, so that residents of the Vale who might be experiencing financial hardship are not disadvantaged. And again, specifically in relation to off-street charges, that there should be engagement with relevant stakeholders in the Western Vale in relation to the service design of car parks in that area. I've already said that committee has indicated they think there should be an equality impact assessment in relation to the future of Court Road car park. to be specific, that more work is required to identify current use, potential impact of closure, the availability of alternative car parking spaces, the potential impact that might have on nearby residents, and any mitigation that is required to address those concerns. And committee is of the view that the future of Court Road car park should be set within a vision for the town centre in relation to town centre renewal, and that consideration should be given to including a capital bid to secure the future of the car park as part of that process, and that creative solutions should be explored to secure the future of the car park. I'm going to look to committee members to tell me if I've missed anything really important. Councillor Hooper.
It's a point of order, Chair, if I may. I think there's been a motion that's been suggested and seconded in this committee. I think all of those, by the sound of it, all of those points could be ancillary to that motion, but I think this committee needs to throw these recommendations out with the exception of the other one, and we need the chance to be able to vote on it, because I think we've got 120 people, which I've never heard before, watching online, but I understand we've had people in the audience. They want to know that their voices have been heard, and we're doing it. So I think we should have a vote as been requested.
And Councillor Hooper, can I assure you we're going to, as you know, the process that we follow in scrutiny is at the end of debate there's a summing up, and that's what you've just heard me do. I want to check whether I've missed anything key in the summing up. I'm not seeing any hands. Then we have one recommendation before us. Can I ask you to confirm again what that recommendation is?
Thank you, Chair. I therefore, with those ancillary things taken as an additional amendment, I therefore move that we refer this back to Cabinet with a recommendation to withdraw the paper and scrap the proposals.
Duly seconded.
I'm struggling to see how those two are linked, because if the recommendation is to withdraw the report, then the issues that I've raised surely don't apply. So I'm going to suggest that there is a second recommendation.
I was going to explain how it can apply, Chair.
Please do.
Thanks, because we have to show a very strong signal from this scrutiny committee that there is a strong feeling from this committee that we are against these proposals. Now, we know that a new report would then be drafted, and the things that we welcomed can be included in there.
Right, so to be clear, there is the recommendation before us, and I'm going to make a second recommendation. The recommendation before us is that the report, as it stands, should be referred back to Cabinet to be withdrawn, and that a new report should be drafted, taking account of the issues that have been raised by committee tonight. Is that the recommendation that you're proposing?
Yes, Chair. I think that's the spirit of this meeting.
And that has been seconded. Thank you. I'm going to suggest an alternative recommendation, which is that Cabinet consider all the issues that have been raised by this scrutiny tonight, and that appropriate work is done to address concerns before any final decision is made on any of these key proposals. And I would ask if anybody would second that, please.
I second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So,
Chair?
wait a moment, please.
Chair, can I just check? Are we voting, first of all, on the first motion, which is to withdraw the report and refer it back,
Yes.
and then on to the other
Yes,
process?
we will.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So, the recommendation before us, Councillor, do you want to clarify something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think your recommendation actually undermines everything I've just put forward. But secondly, I also did ask for a recorded vote on this. I think it's very important that the public sees exactly who's on this side.
Yes, we're going to move to a recorded vote on the first recommendation, which is that, just to remind you, that the report be referred back to Cabinet to be removed, to be withdrawn, and that a new report is drafted addressing the concerns raised by scrutiny tonight, and we'll move to a recorded vote on that. Officers will let us know when they're ready. We've started, so please, just to remind you, you're either voting for that recommendation or you're against that recommendation or you're abstaining. Thank you.
So someone's changed their vote? Yeah.
Chair, there's a very suspicious bit of floor walking going on here.
Can I just take advice in terms of next steps?
Right, where we have a tie, the chair takes the casting vote.
The joys of being responsible as chair. I do think that we have to try to find a constructive way forward on this issue. I do think we've had a thorough debate on all the issues tonight, and on balance, I'm not convinced that withdrawing the report and starting again is the best way forward. So I'm going to vote against that recommendation. I'm going to propose a second recommendation, which is the issues that I've highlighted tonight in committee are referred back to Cabinet for additional work to be done. And I emphasise this before any of the proposals are implemented. Do we have a seconder for that recommendation?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And again, yes, again, we'll move to a recorded vote.
The vote has started now, committee. So we've got a tie again, Chair, so it'll be you again for casting vote.
And as I propose the recommendation, it will be no surprise that I am endorsing that recommendation. Therefore, this will go back to Cabinet for the consideration of all the issues raised by scrutiny tonight before any work is done on implementing any of the proposals. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution this evening. That brings us to the end of the committee meeting. Just remains for me to thank you and remind committee members that our next